T-minus 10, 9, 8,
The clock is
7,
operating. We're underway.
Tranquility Base here. Endeavour, go at throttle up.
Mit einer gewaltigen Eruption demonstriert der Vulkan Mount St Helens im US-Bundesstaat Washington seine geballte Kraft. Eine Wolke aus Asche und heißem Dampf stieg bis auf 3 Kilometer empor. Vulkanologen rechnen aber nicht mit einer Katastrophe wie 1980, als der ganze Gipfel des Mount Helens in die Luft flog und 57 Menschen tötete. Seither klafft an der Spitze ein düsterer Höllenschlund.
Der Vulkan, der seit Tagen Rauch und Asche spuckt, droht nun auszubrechen. Die Behörden haben die Evakuierung der direkten Umgebung deshalb angeordnet. Die Eruption könne stärker werden als zuvor angenommen, warnen Geologen. Mehr von Thomas Fedder.
Eine riesige Rauchsäule steigt in den Himmel. In immer kürzeren Abständen bebt die Erde, ein Zeichen dafür, dass sich unter dem Mount St Helens Magma bewegt, der Druck steigt. Eine große Eruption steht unmittelbar bevor. In den letzten Tagen hatte sich der rauchende Berg zur Zuschauerattraktion entwickelt. Jetzt werden die Schaulustigen unsanft nach Hause geschickt. Sie da, runter da, weg von dem Pfad. Jeder fährt jetzt ganz vorsichtig nach Hause. Noch fragen, das hier ist der Zeitpunkt, jetzt hier abzuhauen. Schlechte Stimmung bei den Touristen. Viele sind extra angereist, um den Berg endlich Feuer speien zu sehen. Ich bin total enttäuscht, ich wäre gern noch geblieben. Sie hat keine Angst, sie will weiter zugucken. Alarmstufe 3, das heißt, es besteht akute Lebensgefahr. 2000 Menschen, zum größten Teil Mitarbeiter von Forschungseinrichtungen, werden evakuiert. Am Freitag war der Mount St Helens wieder erwacht und hatte Rauch und Asche gespuckt. Eine Eruption mit Magma steht unmittelbar bevor. Damit meinen wir in den nächsten 24 Stunden. Es kann also in den nächsten 5 Minuten passieren oder in der Mitte der Nacht. Man will nicht denselben Fehler machen wie 1980 beim letzten großen Ausbruch. Damals war nicht evakuiert worden, 57 Menschen kamen ums Leben, Forscher, Touristen, Waldarbeiter. Diesmal will man die Warnung des Berges ernst nehmen und mit jedem Beben kommt der große Ausbruch näher.
Geologists who raised the alert level for Mount St Helens. Saturday they said more volcanic activity could occur within the next 24 hours. Kimberly Osias reports from the U.S. state of Washington.
A forced evacuation and a red alert at Mount St Helens. Hundreds of giddy tourists hoping for a safe show forced into their cars. Some just didn't want to go.
But you wanted to try to get a look?
Oh, you bet. I'll climb inside the thing.
For the second time this week, Mount St Helens blew off some steam. It was only a couple of seconds and a few feet high. Nothing like yesterday's blast, which shot up almost 2,000 feet above the crater wall, spitting out rocks the size of cars, spreading them for miles. But it wasn't what you could see that proved ominous for scientists.
It's a vibration. It's not an earthquake. It's a steady, even vibration. And that lasted for about 50 minutes. So while that was going on, and what that means is that fluid, and in this case the fluid is magma, molten material, was moving up toward the surface. When that was happening, the Forest Service decided it was most prudent to start getting people out of the immediate area there.
All week, test results have indicated no presence of volcanic gases, but that just didn't sync up with other data, mainly a swarm of earthquakes. Now scientists believe magma, warm, hot earth, is moving up to the top of the volcano.
We had to start thinking about, could there be fresh magma in slightly larger amounts coming up?
U.S. Secretary of the Interior Gail Norton surveyed the still steaming Mount St Helens from the air.
I have been told that this is similar to monitoring and predicting a tornado. We can say that the situation is right, but you can't say exactly what is going to happen until something does indeed happen.
The media has been forced to evacuate too. We used to be about 5.5 miles from the crater. We have now moved to what is believed to be a much safer distance, 11 miles away. But as we all know, we're dealing with Mother Nature, who could change her mind at any time. Kimberly Osias, CNN, Mount St. Helens, Washington.
Time for a check now the weather conditions around the world. Lola Martinez joins us. Hi, Lola.
Hello there, Relita. And, you know, just 7 days ago, the scene was very different than it is right now. Take a look at these current storms. Only 2 at the moment. Now, just a week ago, as I was saying, the intensity of the hurricanes was definitely affecting parts of the Caribbean, parts of the U.S. Nothing like it this weekend. But I do have to mention, this is still a tropical storm, Lisa, over the northern part of the Atlantic, north of the Azores, becoming extratropical. Now, another system, actually, what was a tropical cyclone has now weakened to a low and producing rather unsettled weather across mainly coastal regions of India's western Gujarat state. But if we just remember about in 1998, a very powerful storm, actually, a powerful cyclone affected this area and more than 3,000 people died, unfortunately. Heading now into the Caribbean and in Central America, we can actually see lots of convection forming here. Now, when October starts, things shift, and this is the area we are concerned about because tropical systems are more likely to form here and also pushing into the Gulf of Mexico. So
for several miles.
We certainly have renewed activity, and it's very possible we'll see more of these small steam eruptions that we saw today.
It looks serene, but for the past week there have been rumblings under this majestic facade. A seismically charged witch's brew of debris from earthquakes, landslides, and avalanches simmering under her dome. Today, rocks the size of cars shot up through a glacier wall behind the dome. The pressure release was so intense, scientists say the force blew the only GPS device clear out of the crater.
It is one small explosion. It could be the first of a string of these explosions. Some could be bigger, and once we engage the magma that is deeper down, we could get a little bit bigger ones yet.
A geologist who flew over the scene at the time of the eruption spoke in awe of nature's power.
When natural events like that take place, and they take place so rapidly, they're obviously an attraction, something that's just it's fun to watch.
The alert level here remains heightened as more eruptions could occur at any moment. Scientists say today's release of pressure was sort of like clearing your throat. It feels good at first, but you may well need to do it again. Kimberly Osias, CNN, Mount St. Helens, Washington.
Nach dem Ausbruch des Vulkans St Helens im US-Bundesstaat Washington haben die Behörden eine Evakuierung angeordnet. Alle Menschen, die in einem Radius von 8 Kilometern um den Berg wohnen, wurden aufgefordert, sich in Sicherheit zu bringen. Nach Angaben der örtlichen geologischen Station könnte der Vulkan in den nächsten 24 Stunden ausbrechen.
Der Berg steht unter Druck. Das Geologische Institut für Vulkanbeobachtungen im Staat Washington ist alarmiert. Gase oder geschmolzenes Gestein pressen gegen die Kruste. Wissenschaftler sagen, dass eine Explosion einen Rauchpilz von mehr als 10.000 Metern entstehen lassen könnte. Nun wird der Berg pausenlos überwacht. Das Beunruhigende ist, warum hört das Beben nicht auf? Seit Mitte September rumort es im Innern des Vulkans. Seitdem hat es mehr als 1000 winzige Erdbeben an dem Feuerberg gegeben. Und sie werden immer heftiger. Was wir versuchen, ist, die Grundbewegung zu messen. Wir wollen wissen, ob Magma im Innern auf den Krater drückt und wie die Gasentwicklung ist. Der letzte dramatische Ausbruch war im Mai 1980. Dabei war die Bergspitze weggeschleudert worden. Ich denke, es könnte jetzt ein kleinerer bis mittlerer Ausbruch werden, fast ohne Vorwarnung. Die Erschütterungen sind so stark wie zuletzt 1986. Damals war der Vulkan ausgebrochen, eine Kuppel aus Lava hatte sich auf die Bergspitze gelegt. Jetzt gilt erneut die höchste Warnstufe. Ich denke, bemerkenswert ist, dass es so viele kleine Erdbeben sind. Jeder denkt an 1980. Ein mehrere 100 Grad heißer, 400 Stundenkilometer schneller Dampfstrom mit Gesteinstrümmern knickte ganze Wälder um. Noch 400 Kilometer entfernt regnete es Vulkanasche. Schulkinder üben wieder die Evakuierung ihrer Klassenzimmer. Eine Standardprozedur überall im Nordwesten der USA seit dem schweren Ausbruch vor 24 Jahren. Damals starben 57 Menschen. Noch ist der Berg eine Besucherattraktion. Insgesamt kennen die Geologen 1500 Vulkane, die in den letzten 10.000 Jahren aktiv waren. Sie gelten nicht als erloschen, sondern bestenfalls als schlafend. Die Behörden haben inzwischen Wanderwege um das Vulkanmassiv gesperrt. Möglich, dass die Erschütterungen die brüchige Kruste so erschüttern, dass Lava ausströmt. Die Nachbarn des Vulkans können nur abwarten.
In state as Mount St Helens threatens to erupt at any moment. We're keeping an eye on the volatile volcano. The minute it starts to blow, we'll take you there live. The volcano alert is at level 3. That's 1 point below eruption.
Die Wissenschaftler gestern noch beruhigten, nein, der Mount St Helens wird nicht ausbrechen, klingt das heute schon ganz anders. Schon in den nächsten Stunden könnte eine Eruption erfolgen. Wie stark der Vulkan dieses Mal Lava spucken wird, ist jedoch unklar. Die Anwohner sind auf jeden Fall gewarnt. Boris Pölsen berichtet.
18. Mai 1980, 8:32 Uhr. Der Mount St Helens explodiert. Ein riesiges Stück des Berges gerät ins Rutschen, wird einfach abgesprengt. In den folgenden Minuten sterben 57 Menschen, Wissenschaftler, Touristen und Holzfäller. Sie erstickten, als sich ihre Lungen mit den glühend heißen Gasen füllten oder wurden von Schlammlawinen mitgerissen. Jetzt droht wieder eine Katastrophe. Der Mount St Helens, er brodelt. Innerhalb der nächsten 24 Stunden wird es einen Ausbruch geben. Das kann in 5 Minuten sein oder in der kommenden Nacht, aber es wird passieren. Unfassbar, trotz der unmittelbaren Gefahr waren Hunderte Schaulustige zum Berg geströmt. Nun müssen sie gehen, das Gebiet um den Mount St Helens wird zwangsevakuiert. Sie da auf dem Pfad, sofort runter da. Jeder geht jetzt zu seinem Auto und fährt vorsichtig nach Hause. Noch Fragen? Dies ist der richtige Zeitpunkt, um hier abzuhauen. Viele wären geblieben. Diese Mutter sogar mit ihrer Tochter, die hätte die Eruption gerne gesehen, sagt sie. Und diese Katastrophentouristin meint, was für eine Enttäuschung, ich habe keine Angst. Alle 3 bis 4 Minuten bebt der Berg bereits, der Ausbruch eine Frage der Zeit. Wann genau und wie stark weiß niemand, doch immerhin, die Menschen in der Region, sie sind gewarnt.
US-Behörden warnen, der Vulkan Mount St Helens im Bundesstaat Washington könnte jeden Moment ausbrechen. Seit 2 Tagen bebt der Berg im Inneren und spuckt Dampf und Asche. Und Experten fürchten, dass das nur eine Art Aufwärmen war. Der Vulkanalarm wurde auf Stufe 3 angehoben und rund um den Berg mussten die Bewohner ihre Häuser verlassen. Aus den USA, Volker Albers.
18 Jahre war er ruhig, der große Berg im Bundesstaat Washington. Jetzt ist er wieder zum Leben erwacht. Von Geologen schon tagelang angekündigt, spuckt der Mount St Helens seit Freitag wieder Asche und Gestein in den Herbsthimmel, einige Brocken so groß wie Autos. Doch das ist anscheinend nur das Vorspiel. Das waren bisher nur kleinere Explosionen, aber es könnten die ersten einer ganzen Serie sein. Es wird vermutlich auch noch größere geben, vor allem wenn das Magma im Berg nach oben kommt. Es ist ein grandioses Naturschauspiel, das bereits eine Menge Zuschauer angelockt hat. Doch so schön es auch aussieht, das Ganze ist nicht ganz ungefährlich. Das Gebiet ist gesperrt, grantelt ein genervter Ranger. Wenn ich nicht Ihren Rücken sehe, gehen Sie in die falsche Richtung. Auch die Anwohner im Umkreis von 8 Kilometern mussten das Gebiet bereits sicherheitshalber verlassen. Die Alarmstufe wurde auf Level 3 angehoben. Das ist die zweithöchste Stufe. Level 4 bedeutet ein ernsthafter Ausbruch. Allerdings erwartet niemand eine Naturkatastrophe in der Dimension vom 18. Mai 1980. Damals waren 57 Menschen ums Leben gekommen. Glühende Lava zerstörte rund 200 Häuser. Der Ascheregen erstreckte sich auf weite Teile Nordamerikas. Noch qualmt es nur aus dem riesigen Krater. Doch wahrscheinlich ist es nur noch eine Frage von Stunden, bis der Mount St Helens, den schon die Indianer nicht ohne Grund rauchender Berg nannten, nach 18 friedlichen Jahren wieder ausbrechen wird.
We are looking at live pictures right now of the volcano in Washington state. The volcano alert level was raised this morning after scientists detected a tremor. The U.S. Geological Survey has been holding a news conference this hour, and scientists are saying that they are cautious and warn that some type of eruption could happen very soon. Hundreds of visitors have been evacuated from the area.
Und Fachleute glauben, ein Ausbruch stehe unmittelbar bevor. Nach zahlreichen Vorbeben wurden die Menschen im Umkreis von 8 Kilometern in Sicherheit gebracht. Geologen befürchten, dass der Vulkan schon innerhalb von Stunden ausbrechen könnte. Eine Katastrophe wie vor 24 Jahren ist aber eher unwahrscheinlich. Damals kamen am St Helens 57 Menschen um.
A close watch on Mount St Helens in the northwestern state of Washington. They held a news conference Sunday, one day after raising the alert level at the volcano and evacuating people from its immediate vicinity. One official says that was done after what he described as interesting and somewhat dramatic events. Tim Rury explains.
Increased rumblings from Mount St Helens prompted government scientists to raise the volcano alert level Saturday to level 3. Level 3 means imminent within 24 hours. That level is the third of 4 levels, with the fourth being eruption. A harmonic tremor was felt, a steady, even vibration, which scientists said meant there was a good chance magma was involved.
And what that means is that fluid, and in this case the fluid is magma, molten material, was moving up toward the surface.
Visitors from the Volcano Observatory Center were evacuated ahead of a possible larger than expected volcanic eruption.
Realized that by this morning we had had more seismic energy released than any time all the way back to May 18th, 1980.
The data suggests that ongoing intense earthquake activity has weakened the rock carapace and dome, increasing the likelihood of an eruption, either in the form of more explosions or perhaps lava flow from the dome.
Friday, plumes of steam, ash, and rocks the size of cars shot up through the glacier wall behind the dome, marking the biggest eruption by the volcano in 18 years. This latest activity from Mount St Helens is not supposed to be anything near the cataclysmic eruption on May 18, 1980, which blew off more than 1,000 feet from the top of the mountain, killing 57 people. I'm Tim Rury reporting.
Der Vulkan Mount St Helens im US-Bundesstaat Washington steht möglicherweise vor einem größeren Ausbruch. Nach Einschätzung von Meteorologen deuten leichte Beben und Dampfwolken auf eine gefährliche Eruption hin. Am Wochenende hatten die Behörden die Räumung der direkten Umgebung des Vulkans angeordnet. Beim letzten Ausbruch des Mount St Helens im Mai 1980 waren 57 Menschen getötet worden.
The next crew of the International Space Station on their way to work, in outer space that is. U.S. astronaut Leroy Chiao and Russian cosmonaut Salazan Sharapov said goodbye to friends and family at Moscow's Star City on Monday. A third cosmonaut will then spend 10 days on the space station and return to Earth with the present crew. The men are on their way to the launch site at Baikonur for a planned October 14th liftoff. The launch has already been postponed twice due to technical problems.
What you're looking for is that ab movement up here. Next is your flex and extension, so kind of bring your knee up in front of you, and then you can bring your leg back. You're looking for the hip. There you go, good.
I was going to say, it starts off with E-time, elapsed time, so that's your counter, basically. So what we like to go find out that we mentioned before is the number of channels that it is recording. So you can go either up or down, but basically you're looking for processing data now. So, okay. And what you're going to do, you're going to kind of hop into the location, so your legs are pretty much parallel with each other. And then go ahead and do a practice run, but what you want to do is put a force of, and you definitely want to take advantage of your free space there when you're doing the exercise.
So the best way is to keep that angle at 90 and that knee locked and just kind of turn with your hips. Yeah.
Right. So that's a good position right there.
That's perfect. 10-second rest.
Okay.
Do 3 reps.
All right. So 2 pushes. Hopefully you can see the 20 in the little red lines we have painted on there. That's 5.
still tethered.
Okay.
He's still tethered. I'm going to take this out of the bag, this end out of the bag, hook it up to him, hook this up to me.
Okay.
And then I'm going to translate.
Okay. With that.
And I'm going to be hooked up to this.
Okay. Okay.
Right. So we'll be daisy chained.
Okay.
Second, we use
standard
two
method.
each.
Yeah. Okay. And have we talked about the IUPFR issue? The Russians are hoping.
The way the other guys are doing it.
Okay. All right.
If we,
So what's in my bag? Are there no workers left?
in your bag, there will only be spare tools, no workers.
Okay. RPCM, rounds of cash. My bag. Yeah, your bag. Okay.
So is it secure? Yeah, it's a fish stringer that's attached on the. Great, I'm Janice. I'm going to be one of your safety divers. We're probably just going to take you down this down line so we don't have to go back up over the truss, and then we'll just take you straight over. And then when the time comes, when you see me do this, we need to route you around.
So you only do it twice, that? Twice.
Twice, yes, twice is going to happen.
Yep.
Are you going?
Okay.
Grab the water line. Grab the water line. Okay.
Let me make the jellyfish tighter.
Oh.
Get about that drink bag so don't roll up on it.
Yeah, I got it. All right.
Where it'll filter out certain frequencies, like background noise. You only pick up frequencies within the voice range. They've actually died out. What's that? Yeah, that's true. Well, I'm wondering if I want to put this down. Point this down. Yeah, I want to.
So, both the top of your head. All right, here we go. Ready? I like this photo, really. Let's get it.
do it, it works. And when some guys
Yeah,
do it,
well,
it
you
works.
know.
Right. Salajan, because his hand is blocked, that sucks.
Here we go. Ready. Here we go, guys. Ready? Good. A little more smiles. Right. One more. Alright. Good. Can you put in there? 1, 2.
Давай, быстрее.
Ну, Лёха, ну ты как...
О, быстрее. Быстро хорошо не бывает.
Dude. Keep going, a couple more. We'll go again, you smile. Cover checklist, install the cover checklist here. Yeah, we're not going to do the pre-breathe equipment because we'll do the pre-breathe.
Exactly. One other item that I'll probably
send. Я используем, потому что мы делаем 4 часа.
As a part of the equipment log prep, I may send you an extra message about this. This is probably already on board and has been printed, but if it's not, I'll send it to you. It was flown like that. And then as it got used, it cracked. The electrical harness is covered with the sheath, and it's got the Vortex sheath on top. Part of it is tucked away in the sides, but the part that you can see from underneath is where all these cables come through. So what you'll want to added this to our inspection list when we do equipment log prep, just as a precaution. Expect some wear and tear. I mean, these things have been used a lot. They've been on the both sides. And this originally, what my plan was to have us get through up to the point of LCBG dawning, and then we would go to lunch. What I'm thinking is, since we're not going to dawn,
yeah, we can just go through it. Install the H straps and equipment lock for translation systems. I remember those from the video. Straight across here. 850 to 950. Okay, crew lock wall. We remove the SCUs and straps and pouches. Transfer the SCUs over. And let's see. So we open the DCM cover. Okay, we'll connect the SCU again. Parallel. Good. Excellent. Checked. Okay, it's locked. Okay, power to back. UIA switch power EV1 and 2.
what does it is?
Okay, good LEDs. Okay, we'll switch this power to SCU. Got our toe. And all our electrodes are in the service kit. Yes. Yep. Assume that it's not so big that it will have moments. Or if we have time to talk to the ground and then see if they would like to try to test the U.S. segment. storage.
Yeah. 2 display.
2 for test mode. Okay.
Setting that. Check channel 1 or 3.
Channel 1. Okay, 3 selected.
3 selected. Check
Baud rate is 34. Okay, checks applications.
Да.
Okay.
Double click AGDH.
Traffic Houston on space ground 1 for the caution.
Go ahead, Houston. Okay, got it.
Move it then.
Scan cable, press F2, move. And now scan the UOP.
UOP.
Okay.
Accept.
Press enter. And then it should be enter again, yeah?
Logging unable to locate and attach server or disable.
F2 remove. Move. And then scan this cable.
Yes. Accept.
Так, и там уже это самое, не помню. Через эти, да?
Да, и там перчатки такие, перчатки, там выполняют эксперимент.
Я правильно понимаю, Ольга, что сейчас иллюминатор, он есть, просто прибудет специальный прибор, который антиотсвечиватель.
So, am I understanding correctly that right now we do have that window there, and what we're expecting in Iraq is a special system that will allow us to make better.
В принципе, на 110 вольт на камеру, да? Заряд полный. Может, какая разница? Камера переменная. Надо узнать. Откуда заряд придет?
Просто если 120, можно взять с собой на 120, сертифицировать.
The plan for the deck in the node is for the actually node 3 or half module.
Major eruption may be imminent. Well, on Friday, a minor explosion sent up a plume of steam and ash. And joining us with more now is Ted Rowland. Ted.
Hi, Fanula. About 2.5 hours ago, we got quite a bit of excitement here when there was a large release of steam and ash going into the air for a period of about 40 minutes. However, that is just another precursor to what the geologists on site here say will be the main event, if you will, when we'll have a volcanic eruption involving the volcanic gases, which are creeping their way up the volcanic throat and getting closer and closer. The steam release, according to the geologists, was the result of the magma material, which is searing hot, coming into contact with water inside the volcanic structure. That produced a steam effect which had some old volcanic ash associated with it. However, the amount of ash was limited, and there were no real detrimental effects in terms of the environment or any public safety issues. That said, an 8-mile area has been cleared around Mount St. Helens as a precaution. People have gathered around it to witness what is expected to be quite a show when Mother Nature decides to put it on. It is not expected to be a show or a volcanic eruption to the magnitude of what we saw in 1980 here in Mount St. Helens, when 57 people lost their lives, and geologists were caught a bit off guard by the way and the intensity and the way the eruption took place. They're quite sure that it'll be a smaller volcanic eruption, and they're also quite sure that it is going to happen. It's just a matter of exactly when.
And Ted, any predictions or otherwise about how big this eruption might be compared to the last big one in 1980?
Well, I don't think it will compare at all in terms of magnitude. That eruption had a lot more going for it, if you will. The size of the magma pool, which was working its way up the volcano, even before that eruption, was measured at a much larger area. In this situation now, what they're seeing is a basic bulge in the crater that is only in a small, comparatively small area. In 1980, the entire side of one of the sides of the mountain was bulging before it actually went, and then there was a 5.2 earthquake associated with it, which combine to create a massive, devastating explosion. They do not expect anything close to that this time around, but quite frankly, they're not sure what to expect in terms of magnitude.
All right, there I'll have to leave it, but Ted Rowland, thank you very much indeed.
Mehrere Tornados haben nach schweren Unwettern in den USA gewütet. Innerhalb von 40 Minuten sind nach Augenzeugenberichten gleich 11 Tornados gezählt worden. Am Flughafen Denver im Bundesstaat Colorado mussten Flüge umgeleitet werden. Die Tornados knickten auf ihrer Route mehrere Strommasten um. Personen kamen nicht zu Schaden.
Vulkanausbruch. Diesmal hat der Mount St Helens im US-Bundesstaat Washington eine 3 Kilometer hohe Wasserdampfwolke ausgestoßen. Grund dafür ist heiße Lava im Innern des Berges, die Eisschichten zum Schmelzen bringt. Der Luftraum über dem Krater wurde gesperrt. Neue Erdbeben haben die Sorge vor einem Ausbruch weiter vergrößert. Mini-Tornado bei Denver. Die spektakulären Bilder hat ein Helikopter eines amerikanischen Fernsehsenders aufgenommen. Von diesem Exemplar in der Nähe des Denver Flughafens ging allerdings keine Gefahr aus. Verletzte gab es nicht. In den USA werden jedes Jahr mehr als 1000 Tornados gezählt.
Of much curiosity and concern. Volcano watchers have gathered by the hundreds to watch Mount St Helens blow off some pressure in the northwestern U.S. state of Washington. Monday's outburst, 40 minutes of steam. Scientists stopped short of calling it an eruption because it was almost entirely vapor.
And southwestern Mexico's Volcano of Fire has been releasing some steam as well.
For more on that, as well as your global weather outlook, let's go to the Weather Center and to Guillermo Arduino. Hi, Guillermo.
Zane and Jim, I'm going to show you exactly where that volcano is in Mexico. It's very close to the city of Colima, called the Volcano of Fire. That would be the English translation, or also Volcán del Nevado, which means a snowy mountain volcano. Let's go and take a look at what's going on there too. So it appears that there's some coordination in Washington state with Mexico. The Volcano of Fire is releasing some steam now, as we see here. Ropes of burning orange lava poured from the peak of the volcano, the Volcán del Fuego, on last Friday, actually, so 3 days ago. Now it's a little bit better, it's a little bit quieter, but authorities are on alert. But so far, no one has been told to leave the area. Mexico has many volcanoes. Actually, it's a very nice scenery in the area. Fortunately, Colima's a big city, but not as big as Mexico City. So the surroundings are pretty much countryside.
Mindestens 10 Tornados sind über den Nordosten von Denver hinweggefegt. Innerhalb von nur 40 Minuten steigerten sich die anfänglich kleinen Stürme zu Tornados. Mehrere Häuser und Scheunen wurden von den Wirbelstürmen komplett zerstört. Verletzt wurde jedoch niemand. Tornados sind um diese Jahreszeit äußerst selten. Der Oktober gilt als der ruhigste Wettermonat in Denver. Bevorstehender Ausbruch. Mit einer riesigen Dampfwolke über dem Krater hat sich der Vulkan Mount St Helens erneut geregt. Die überwiegend aus Wasserdampf bestehende Wolke zog 3 Kilometer hoch in den Himmel. Der Luftraum über dem Vulkan wurde unterdessen für den Flugverkehr gesperrt. Mit Spannung warten Wissenschaftler und Schaulustige nun auf den Ausbruch. Geologen rechnen nicht damit, dass der Ausbruch so stark sein wird wie im Mai 1980, als 57 Menschen ums Leben kamen.
Das Kamerateam ist es im Bundesstaat Colorado gelungen, diese Aufnahmen von Tornados zu machen, die über einen Ort nördlich von Denver hinweggezogen sind. Solche Aufnahmen sind deshalb so selten, weil sonst die Kraft der Tornados Beobachtungsflüge zu gefährlich macht. In diesem Fall handelt es sich um Tornados der untersten Kategorie mit Windgeschwindigkeiten um die rund 100 Kilometer in der Stunde. Aber auch sie reichen aus, wie man sieht, um an Gebäuden und Bäumen erhebliche Schäden zu hinterlassen.
Die Eissituation dort, die nimmt ja ab, das Eis nimmt ab seit einigen Jahren. Hier mal eine Aufnahme von Satelliten vom Jahre 2002. Blau bedeutet, die Eisschicht ist dünner geworden und zum Teil eben auch schon abgetaut an den Rändern. Und wenn man dann das Jahr 2003 sieht, dann ist das ähnlich. Auch hier sehr dünn geworden im Bereich Amerikas, Alaskas etwa. Und auch in diesem Jahr ist die Eisdecke weiter reduziert, etwa um 13%. Zugenommen hat sie eigentlich nur in Nordrussland, ansonsten eigentlich überall dünner geworden. Man nimmt an, das liegt an der globalen Erwärmung und bis zum Jahre 2070 könnte es sein, dass das Eis der Arktis vollkommen abtaut. Guten Abend. Zum Wochenende stellt sich eine ganz typische Zweiteilung des Wetters in Deutschland wieder her. Wir haben hier noch die feuchte Luft hier und milde Luft über den Alpen. Die kommt morgen ein Stück in die Mitte Deutschlands voran, angetrieben von einem ehemaligen Wirbelsturm, nämlich Wirbelsturm Jan. Der liegt jetzt als normales Tiefdruckgebiet mit einer ganzen Menge Regen vor Portugal. In Norddeutschland behalten wir dagegen das trockene, aber eben auch kühle Wetter. Spielt wieder mit dem europäischen Wetter. Der Wirbelsturm Jan hat ja in Florida etwa vor 10 Tagen die Zerstörung verursacht. Er hat den Weg über den Atlantik geschafft, aber der Atlantik ist kühl. Deshalb hat er sich abgeschwächt, ist ein ganz normales Tiefdruckgebiet, das jetzt zurzeit vor der Biskaya und Portugal liegt mit einer ganzen Menge Regen. Er wird dafür sorgen, dass auch unser Wetter am Wochenende im Süden eben immer wieder Regen bringt. Im Norden allerdings, da reicht sein Einfluss einfach nicht hin. Da bleibt es bei dem trockenen Wetter. Und dann erst wieder über Skandinavien haben wir mit diesem Tiefdruckgebiet Regen oder auch im Norden schon mal Schnee. Und recht schönes Wetter derzeit in Irland und Großbritannien mit diesem Hochdruckgebiet. Sonnig dort, aber auch nur 10 bis 15 Grad. Kühl in Skandinavien und auch in Teilen Osteuropas. Ja, in Mitteleuropa, im östlichen Mitteleuropa recht mild mit 20 Grad und warm weiterhin rund ums Mittelmeer. Also die 25 Grad aller Orten, aber eben zum Teil auch mal die 30.
What's it like to float weightless in space? Have you ever wondered what you'd think if you could look down on Earth from a spaceship? If you had a chance to ask someone who's been there and done it, what would you ask? Well, today you have that chance because our guest on Talking Point is the astronaut Michael Foale. He has spent a total of 374 days in space. That's more than a year. And he's been on 4 spacewalks lasting more than 22 hours. He spent 4.5 months living on the Russian space station Mir. He spent 6 months on the International Space Station. So he knows better than almost anyone else on Earth or in space what it's like out there. Well, today he's here on Earth and he's with me here in the Talking Point studio. Michael Foale, welcome to the programme.
Well, thank you, Robin.
I want to ask you a question. Where are you happier, on Earth or in space?
Well, any one thing, and I think starts to get a little bit less interesting. You become accustomed to it, and so you want change. And I certainly am someone who needs change in my life all the time.
So when you're on Earth, you want to be in space, and when you're in space, you want to be on Earth?
That's right. The other side of the fence is always greener.
There are a lot of people who want to ask you a lot of questions. We've had a lot of emails, and I know there are already people phoning in. So wherever you are, whether you are listening on the BBC World Service Radio, whether you're watching on BBC World Television or tuning in on the internet, this is your chance to ask your question. Here's how to get in touch.
You can call Talking Point Collect on 4420 8749 5353 or email us your comments. The address is talkingpoint@bbc.co.uk. You can also send us an SMS text message to 447736 100 100.
So let's go to our first call then. This one comes from Kuwait. Dave is on the line. Hello, Dave.
Hello, good evening.
Hi, good evening to you. What did you want to ask?
Hello, Mike.
Hello, David.
Can you hear me? Yeah, I'm just thrilled to get a chance to talk to you.
Yeah, go ahead, Dave.
As a child, I imagined, that the God is always watching us from the sky. I used to think about God's eye view. You have experienced that view as a human being. Probably you are the God's closest person, Michael. How did you feel when you saw the Earth from the space and then thought about the people inside it fighting for land, for religion, and for so many useless reasons, and killing each other every day?
All right, Dave, thanks for that. When you looked down on Earth for the first time, what did you think?
Well, David brings up, it's an emotional thing when you see the Earth for the first time from space. You're aware of all the people that you love, of all the things that you value behind you, there, somewhere else. And just the colors, the brightness, the impression of the Earth is extraordinary. As far as knowing God better in space, I don't believe that took place for me. I do realize that the universe is a physical thing, and God is not necessarily out there amongst the stars. I think it's as much amongst people as it is beyond us.
Did it make you feel very insignificant, looking down on, after all, what is not a very large planet in universe terms, and thinking that's all we have?
One of the most powerful memories I ever have of being in space was when I was on the Mir space station. It was at a point where we had lost all of our power. There was no energy on the station, and we were cooling down. We were feeling all of the energy being sucked out of the station. There was not a sound. There were no fans running. Nothing was working on it. And I was looking towards the galaxy, towards the Milky Way, and the stars were bright and clear and colored. And I just felt how they knew nothing and cared nothing about the predicament that we were in at that point. And so I just decided, if we want to do anything, it has to come from within us. We can't wait for help from outside.
And so when you're back on Earth and you hear your neighbours arguing about, I don't know, what should be done about the traffic in town or something like that, doesn't it seem to you extraordinarily unimportant?
No, I think it's all important to people. And my point is that we have to solve our own problems. You can't wait for the big universe to come in and help you. And that was the impression certainly I got when I was in space. And looking down on countries, when you think about the strife, the awful things going on sometimes in some countries. I saw a huge big black spot over Iraq during my most recent mission on the space station. It was from a broken pipeline near Basra, and the plume was going all the way to Baghdad. And I called down and I asked if there was any stories about it. And there was only a small footnote in one newspaper that this had happened. And yet, from space, it was a dramatic, huge event that was marking the planet. So these things have different scales, and it depends on where you see them from.
Let's take another call. From Kuwait, we go to Bermuda. Doug Jones is on the line from Hamilton. Hello, Doug.
Oh, hi, Michael. First of all, let me say that the space program has always been awe-inspiring and amazing to me. However, I read a book by Robert L. Park, and he maintains that manned spaceflight is very costly, inefficient scientifically, and dangerous, and that we should scrap projects like the International Space Station and Men on Mars, etc., like that, and we should concentrate on robotic missions, which are cheaper and yield greater amount of scientific data. And I was wondering if you agree with that, and if there's any missions you can think of, like scientific missions, that only a human could perform.
OK, thanks for that, Doug. Before you answer that, Michael Foe, let me just throw in an email. Similar question comes from Colin Butts, who's in Milton, Massachusetts, in America. He said, I think there's no job in space that cannot be done more cheaply and more safely by a machine rather than a human. There is no compelling reason for us to spend extra money and risk lives to put people into orbit. How do you feel about this?
Well, I'll go right to the gist of the matter is that it all depends on your historical or your view of where humanity is going. If you don't think we're going to move forward, if you don't think we're going to discover anything new, if you aren't going to use your own minds to explore the world scientifically or just from a point of view of curiosity, then you do not have to explore. But at some point, your own survival is threatened when you don't explore. This is certainly true in history when people had to explore to find out what was beyond the next hill, to see if there were tribes ready to come in and invade you. We have to send people out to find out where we can get more resources from. Unfortunately, we're resource hungry as a species. And so exploration is actually, I believe, one of our survival instincts. How do you do it? Now, Dr. Robert Park, yes, I'm aware of what he thinks. His is a very narrow view. It's local to this time, this decade, or maybe the last decade, or maybe the decade before it. It's certainly not appropriate in 1,000 years' time. And we know that asteroids hit the Earth. We know that there are very, very large explosions when those take place. Eventually, one's going to hit the Earth again, if we do nothing about it. So human species survival is involved here.
You make it sound as if it's a defense mechanism.
I think it's an instinctive process to explore. Every child doesn't have to have it explained to them. They know. It's the adults who suppress it because it gets the child into trouble. How you explore with robots and how you explore with humans, that is a balance. And indeed, you send the robots to the most difficult places, the most extreme places first. And then if you have the technology or you have the desire to follow with human beings, you send them also. The moon landings were a very good example where robot landers, the Surveyor lunar lander craft, they would land, they showed that they weren't going to sink into dust. They showed some very basic properties of the moon. But then the geologists the astronauts, and the last geologist was Harrison Schmitt on Apollo 17, they saw things in context. They asked questions while they were looking.
So you do believe, do you, that you learn things by putting people into space that you could not learn any other way?
Absolutely, yes. And let's put it another, when you say a robot could do everything that a human being can do, well, will they write poetry? Will they paint the Earth from space or the lunar landscape? No.
We'll take another call. This is Rich Dusek, who's in Michigan in America. Rich, hi.
Hi.
Go ahead.
How are you this morning?
Fine.
Excuse me, for me this morning.
Go ahead.
Hello, Michael.
Hello.
My question for you, and I'll start with a comment. I worked at McDonnell Douglas in St. Louis in the late 60s and early 70s, and I had the opportunity to work on the Skylab program. And one of the things that always annoyed me or I felt was under broadcast was the fact that, I forget the percentage, but something like 85 or 90% of the activity, the scientific and observation activity that took place on Skylab, was to study the Earth, to learn more about the rainforest, more about climate and so on, to make the Earth better. And I would like your comments regarding your experience on your various missions. How much of that is really looking to the Earth to try to learn more and make it better for the people on Earth versus what many would call worthless stargazing?
Worthless stargazing. Okay, Rich, thanks for that. Michael Foale.
Well, that's well put. If I was to go and be launched at great cost to space and only look at the stars and say nothing about it, I believe that would be of no value to anybody but Michael Foale. But that is not the gist of what we do. We only go to space, we're only launched into space as astronauts and cosmonauts to bring back results to Earth, to all the people who have a stake in us. Astronauts and cosmonauts are actually just at the very tiny tip of a large pyramid of people who have worked to get you to space. And then beyond that pyramid, there are all the people who are interested in the results of what you see, what you learned, and what the discoveries are that you are making. Sometimes those discoveries are slow in terms of doing research on physical processes in the space station laboratory, or they might be quicker than that. They may be like the picture I took of Iraq with a big black spot over it, and I called down and I asked Houston, is there anything going on in Iraq? No, they said. Well, I said, well, there is.
But
it's instant feedback.
It's taxpayers' dollars who send you into space. And I suppose some taxpayers at least are entitled to ask, what do I get back from that? How do I benefit?
Absolutely. And I think the point is we found a balance already where in America anyway, the space program uses about 0.4% of the budget of the United States. And that's a balance that's basically kind of evolved there over many hagglings in Congress. That represents about the interest or the priority that the American public have on spaceflight. And so it's not too much, it's not too little. They've sort of worked it out in the budget process. So they are getting their value for money, they think, based on that.
Rich, do you think it's value for money?
Oh, absolutely. I think it's value for money. I read Aviation Week. I stay up on this type of thing. Probably much closer. It's a much greater part of the taxes I pay than that percentage you mentioned. But one of the things I see, like I run across something in Aviation Week or in some other scientific publication that is learned about the Earth in terms of various factors, whether it be oceanography, climate, and so on. And sometimes I feel that we, the scientific, or we, the engineers, do ourselves a disservice because, as you comment, Michael, there are many small, wonderful things that really will benefit mankind, if not today, tomorrow, within a decade or 2 decades. But it seems we as NASA, we as those involved, don't publicize, don't project, don't explain to enough people what we're seeing, how we're seeing it, and why it's important to the Earth and to the people on Earth. And that's the part to me that's frustrated me since Skylab, is that I think we're poor publicists when we do find things that are in fact important.
Okay, Rich, thanks very much for that. There's an email that's come in, linked issue actually. This is from Mark Zwinderman, who's in Edinburgh in Scotland. There's been a lot of talk that the space station is not actually carrying out any worthwhile science and that the crew only ever have time to carry out maintenance work. What was your experience when you were on the station?
Well, that question's pertinent, especially after the Columbia tragedy. Before the Columbia tragedy, we had 3 people on board the International Space Station as a standard crew size. And at that time, they allowed 20 hours out of a 20 person hours out of a three-person week for science. And I thought that was very low. It's a very, very low fraction. You know, 1/2 of one person on board the space station to do science. Well, we got to the space station as a two-person crew, myself and Sasha Kaleri. And I think I was probably spending about half of my time on the science activities. And so we've gone from a three-person crew to a two-person crew, and I was still carrying out the same fraction, the same number of hours of science activity. So we had become more efficient is what had happened.
What kind of science? What were you doing?
We have experiments that go from the obvious, which are how does the human body behave in space? You know, I would have electrodes all over my muscles. They would be recorded. The impulses to the muscles would be recorded over a day's typical activity, and then compare that to what would be on Earth, and that gives some insight into simply neuromotor functions of a human being, both on Earth and in space. There was another one where a surgeon in Italy is a specialist in reattaching the severed limbs of children. And the problem he'd come across was that, especially wrists and arms, that in figuring out how to reconnect the nervous tissue in the hand, he didn't know how much emphasis to put on the simple act of holding the hand up in gravity. And so he gave us a very sophisticated experiment that we did using a rather fancy glove with rate gyros and accelerometers all over it. And I would have to throw an imaginary ball towards the ceiling on the space station, no gravity there, of course, to bring the ball down again, to measure the effects that my hand was putting into it in weightless conditions. And then I would have to do the same thing back on Earth.
So this was giving him information which he hoped would be of benefit to children, which he could not have had if you hadn't been there in space doing it.
Absolutely, and it's an Italian experiment, part of the International Space Station Partnership.
Interesting. We'll take another call in a moment. First, though, quick reminder, this is Talking Point. We're broadcasting on BBC Television, radio, and on the internet at bbcnews.com. I'm Robin Lustig. My guest is the astronaut Michael Foale. There is still plenty of time for you to join the conversation. Here are the numbers.
You can call Talking Point Collect on 4420 8749 5353 or email us your comments. The address is talkingpoint@bbc.co.uk. You can also send us an SMS text message to 447736 100 100.
Well, we were talking about the International Space Station. Here's an email from Zenon in Texas, who says, I've heard reports that the International Space Station could be doomed if the space shuttle does not get up and running soon. What are your thoughts?
I really don't believe that. If the space shuttle does not fly, that will change how we use the International Space Station very dramatically. But how did I get to the International Space Station and back? I didn't go on the space shuttle this time. It was my 6th flight, and I flew on the Russian Soyuz rocket. If the United States backs away from the International Space Station in using its shuttle, then Russia will surely pick up that vacuum and fill it with its own rockets, and with its Progress launches to supply cargo, and with its Soyuz rockets to supply the people. So I think it's only a matter of will on the part of the United States to continue, rather than one of, oh, something's going to happen to the International Space Station.
Okay, here's another one, another email from Sean, who's in Hagerstown, Maryland, in America. Says, President Bush wants to go to the moon and to Mars. What will it take to complete the International Space Station? Where does the International Space Station fall into this plan to move out into the solar system?
The International Space Station right now is our only base camp, our only frontier post in space, which is permanently manned. The International Space Station needs to be finished to the point where our partners, the Japanese and their laboratory, and Europe, the Columbus module, are delivered. Once those pieces are attached to the International Space Station, in my mind, it's pretty much complete. Using the International Space Station to then go to the moon and Mars, one would use it to do the sensible things, test the life support system that you need, that has to be closed and completely independent of the Earth. And you test that on the space station first, then you put it on the moon, and then on the moon, after you've tried it out there, you would use maybe a derivative, modifications to go to Mars. I talked about life support. Another one would be engines. We can test engines on the International Space Station. Modern electrical engines that put out ions at very, very high speed are very efficient. We can test those engines on the International Space Station and we can tweak and fiddle with them, more like in a laboratory than on a satellite.
So it's essential, the way you describe it.
It's not essential. I believe you can always do these experiments separately, but they would be very, very difficult without the International Space Station.
The whole issue of Mars and whether we're going to get there and if we're going to live there is a fascination to many, many people. We have a lot of questions. Let's go to Kabul in Afghanistan because Akhtar Mohammed wants to ask you about it. Akhtar, hello?
Hello, do you hear me?
Yes, we hear you. Go ahead.
Yeah, hello to Michael and everybody. So I have three questions. The first one, is it possible for people to live in Mars in future? This is the first one. And the second one, if you want, I will see you.
All right, well, let's stay with the first one, Akhtar Mohammed. It's a simple question. Do you believe that one day people will live on the planet Mars?
Absolutely, completely.
No doubt?
No doubts, yes. Yes.
Why are you so sure?
Because I just have to look at history. I know we don't remember how much it cost for Magellan to do his expeditions. In fact, you can research it. We don't know how much it cost for the Vikings to go across to North America. We don't know how much it cost when they did exploratory raids in other countries. But we know all of that took place. We know that people will always look beyond the next place for more resources, to learn more things, for more trade routes.
There are problems.
When it will happen, that is the question I can't answer. I know it will happen just based on human character.
Okay, there's the optimistic side. Let's look at the pessimistic side for a moment. This question came from Andrew Namiko, who's in New Hampshire. What do you think are the biggest physical obstacles facing a human mission to Mars?
The biggest physical obstacles are all overcomable. They basically would probably be radiation doses that people would get in the journey from Earth orbit to Martian.
It's a long way. It's what, 3 years or something it would take?
It depends on how you go. If we go today, we're using the chemical rockets that were used, for example, to go to the moon. We would take about 6 months to get to Mars. We could spend 30 days or a year on the surface of Mars, and you have to choose. And then we could spend 9 months coming back. The radiation you get would be about 3 times the amount that I've received already in my career in 6 space flights and more than a year in space. So it would be equal to about 3 years in space. And the doctors in America believe that that would increase the chance of me dying. This is a risk issue of increasing the risk of dying of cancer by 3%. I don't consider that very significant compared to the value of going to Mars, exploring it and coming back and talking about it.
Just listening to you talk about it, I think I know the answer to the next question, but here it is anyway. It's an email that came from Sarah, who's 13 years old in Manchester here in England. Would you like to go to Mars?
I would love to go to Mars. I'd like to do it properly prepared. I'd like to know that we had thought about what we're going to do there, how long we'd stay there.
At the moment, we don't know how to get off again, though, do we?
Yes.
You can do that? Okay.
There are a number of very good ways of going to Mars, and I think, but they need to be discussed at length to see what's the most efficient one. Today, I would say we should go to Mars, land for a year, and live on Mars, use rovers, explore, have a base rather like in Antarctica, like the base that the British Antarctic Survey support in Antarctica, do a lot of research, explore the geology, look for the signs of life, and then come back after a year using rocket propellant that was made on Mars. And that way we would have so much more ability to take more equipment to Mars to come back.
Can you explain the fascination with that one planet, with Mars? Why is it that you and so many of our listeners and viewers are absolutely intrigued by what is on that planet?
I think the focus on Mars has actually been shaped by the fact that it appears to be the closest environment in which we could live to that of the Earth. Venus has a nice name. Venus is a planet of about the same size as the Earth, and so your initial thought, just by looking at the size of it, would be Venus, but it's too hot. We know things that say we don't want to go there until we are much, much more sophisticated.
You talked about radiation and exposure to radiation, how much you've already been exposed to, how much you would be exposed to if you went to Mars. We had an email from R.C. Robjohn, who's here in England. What type of shielding would be used to protect the crew against radiation poisoning?
If we went the chemical way, the way Apollo did, which I don't think we should do, by the way, I'll go into that, we would have to use water. We'd have to take water with us for that long journey, and we'd have to put the water between us and the sun, or the source of radiation. There are two major sources of bad radiation: the sun and, unfortunately, the galaxy. The galaxy is a much bigger object, and it's all around us. So generally we can't defend ourselves adequately, except in a sort of thin shell sense, where you put the water all around you, around the walls of your cabin. But if we know that there's a solar storm coming, we can put a big body of water, maybe a meter thick, between us and the sun for the solar storms. If we had a nuclear reactor, and all these issues have to be worked out. How do we get nuclear materials into space that are completely safe, that could handle the rocket blowing up, would never be of any harm to anybody in the event of that catastrophe? But if we got the reactor into space and then had the shielding for the reactor that we need as a crew anyway, between us and the reactor would then be our screen or our shielding for solar radiation.
Let's move closer to Earth again. We've talked about Mars, the Moon. We have been to the Moon. There is talk. President Bush says he's determined that Americans should go back to the Moon. Number of questions about that. This one from Sasha here in London. He's 13. There have been a lot of questions about man going back to the Moon. Do you think it will happen? Daniel Rowlands in Washington, D.C. Do you consider the establishment of permanent settlements on the Moon or on Mars a good goal for human space flight programs? And Geeta in India, why haven't there been more attempts to visit the Moon, especially with all the new technologies that are now available?
Yes, I think we should go back to the Moon. I do believe it will happen in about 20 years or less. I think it depends a little bit on the next election.
The next US election?
Yes, I think so. And the ones after that. It depends on the will of people, political will. However, it will take place, and I would think in 20 years. The first base on the Moon will be specifically to do research there, learn about being slightly, not completely, but slightly self-sufficient on the lunar surface, so that we were prepared to be able to go to Mars and do the same thing there. What would the base be like? It would be, again, like the Antarctic bases. These are mostly scientific outposts. You wouldn't call them settlements. They're not places where you sent people to live and not come back from. But they're bases, they're outposts where research is done and preparation is made to increase your population.
And where they could create some of the things, at least, that they need for continued existence there.
That's correct, absolutely. In particular on Mars we can extract oxygen. On Mars we can certainly get most of the materials, metals, nitrogen. Nitrogen is actually one of our limited consumables on Mars, which we'd have to take with us. Water is a key to life, and water, luckily, we know is on Mars. Whether there's water on the Moon is not... We know there's some trace amounts of water on the Moon, but we'd like to find a lot of it, because then that would make living on the Moon much easier.
We're going to take another call. This one is from New Zealand. Robert Sutton is in Auckland. Robert, hello.
Can you hear me there?
Yeah, we hear you.
Yes, greetings, Rob and Mike. I'm interested in, I wonder if the work of Franklin Chan Diaz will pan out. Hopefully that will. Interesting, he had to call from Afghanistan, the home of the, or rather non-home of the only refugee cosmonaut. But out of the questions I like to ask, one that comes most to mind probably is, Mike, regarding your space career, if you could do anything over again, what would you most like to do over again and why? And about the docking, you've had, of course, there were problems during one of your flights with dockings, and just recently with this most recent docking, there were problems. Have you had any input, or do you plan to, or think you'll have any input into any changes or improvements there will be into the approach and docking systems or procedures for the ISS?
Okay, Robert, thank you for that.
I'm not someone who regrets events or something that I did. I'm a little bit... I just accept life can throw you some bad experiences, good ones, they all go together to make a rich life, and I'm grateful for the chances I've had. So I wouldn't redo anything. Regarding the dockings, actually we had, it wasn't so much a docking, but it was a collision on the Mir space station. And that was a very, very different situation where the Russians were conducting an experiment that turned off equipment we would normally use to control its speed and its distance coming in towards the space station. And the commander lost control of the cargo ship and it collided with us and caused a big leak and loss of atmosphere. That is a very different issue from what happened yesterday, where the spacecraft carrying the new crew was coming in to approach the space station, and they, for one reason or another, and I have some theories, I know a little bit about it, they were unable to slow down their approach to the space station in the very close distances, about 50 meters. And this forced the crew to be told to switch to other rockets to push out again and then go to a backup system to come in again. Actually, I believe that's going to be looked into pretty heavily over the next few weeks, and we will see an explanation of that soon.
That occasion when you were on Mir, was that the most frightening experience you've had in all of your space travels?
It's certainly the one where I got the most adrenaline flying in my stomach, and I did think to myself, well, I wonder if this is really it, you know. I was quite in a kind of detached way thinking, am I going to feel all the air moving out of my lungs? It wasn't that bad, and you know, I kind of counted 2 or 3 seconds as I was going towards the Soyuz spacecraft, which is our rescue ship.
It was pretty scary anyway.
Well, no, it's just one of you know, you get into this strange kind of, there's adrenaline, but you're just thinking very hard about what you're going to do next.
So what was the best moment then in space? What's the moment you would most like to capture and relive? The moment we thought, this is why I do this?
I think probably on this last space flight, I had asked for the American segment, Houston, to turn off all of the lights of the arm, the Canadian arm, that was looking at us during our spacewalk in Russian spacesuits. It was on the dark side of the Earth, and we were coming up over Africa, over Chad, and then Egypt, over Israel, then towards Afghanistan and Pakistan. And I could see all the lights. Saudi Arabia burns an enormous amount of lights. I could see all the lights of the Earth below us. And I could see the galaxy above us and the stars. It was and a little bit of lightning flashing over the central parts of Africa where the storms are. And that was a very, very beautiful moment. And that's something I want to hold forever. Generally, spacewalking is extraordinarily beautiful. It's a very impressive thing to do.
Interesting you say that, because this is an email that's come from Baghdad, in fact. Ayad Raouf says, have you ever been frightened while you were spacewalking?
No, not really, no.
The spacewalking isn't the most frightening thing that you do?
It's the most demanding thing that you can do, because you have to do things with physical strength and with grace, in that you mustn't kick anything, because you weigh almost 400 pounds, you know, 200 kilos. And if you kick something, you'll break it.
Right.
When I say weigh, our mass is that high, and our inertia is such that if we move fast, we'll break something. Also, your tasks generally require a lot of, sometimes, fidelity. And if you make a mistake, it's very awkward to go back and fix it. My worst, well, not worst, and greatest moment in space was probably replacing the brain of the space telescope, Hubble. And there we had a computer that was very old, needed to be changed out. It was a 386, and we were changing it out to a Super 486. And I had about 1,000 little gold pins to be joining up in my big, bulky spacesuit gloves. And I had trained this hundreds of hours in the water tank over a year. But I knew that if I was the one that broke Hubble, I would never forgive myself, nor would anyone else. And so when I finally, and I was great trepidation when I did this task, when I finally put the last connectors together, and I kind of just sort of relaxed and felt drained after an hour of activity. And I looked at the telescope and I looked at the Earth behind it, and I heard them say, "Mike, the computer is alive."
Wow.
You know, that was probably the most exhilarating moment I ever had.
Mission
and
accomplished.
I had tears in my eyes. I was so relieved that I hadn't broken the telescope.
Extraordinary.
But actually replaced the computer and fixed it.
We're going to take a lot more calls in a moment. First, though, quick reminder, this is Talking Point. We're broadcasting on BBC Television, radio, and on the internet at bbcnews.com. I'm Robin Lustig. My guest is the astronaut Michael Foale. There is still time for you to join us. Here's how.
You can call Talking Point Collect on 4420 8749 5353 or email us your comments. The address is talkingpoint@bbc.co.uk. You can also send us an SMS text message to 447736 100 100.
Well, we've had a number of questions which have come to us on tape. Let's hear one of those now.
Hi, I'm Tamika Banks-Jackson from American University in Washington, D.C., and my question is for you. In lieu of new developments, do you think that commercial spaceflight is a viable campaign?
Commercial space flights, viable?
Oh, I think it's already shown to be viable. We've already had two privately funded space flights flown on the Russian Soyuz rocket, one by Dennis Tito, an American, and one by Mark Shuttleworth from South Africa and a British citizen. Clearly the question is referring to the very, very exciting events, in my mind, that took place a couple of weeks ago in the Mojave Desert with Spaceship One, built by Burt Rutan and his team. I understand that Mr. Branson has decided to invest in it, and I would say that's a very wise investment.
So just to be clear, though, we're talking about a foreseeable moment in the future when people can buy a ticket to space in the way that they buy a ticket across the Atlantic Ocean or to go and have a holiday in Italy.
It's not having a holiday in Italy, nor is it like taking a plane across the ocean. The difference is the risk. The risk is very high. It's the same as the risk in flying on the space shuttle. It may be worse. The risk is high. The chance of being killed is of the order of 1 in 100 or less, or worse than that, you know, 1 in 50 or something like on the shuttle. So the risk is high. It's more in the league of adventure holidays in the extreme. It's not as bad as climbing Everest, which I think is like 1 in 3. So it's somewhere in there. It's definitely adventure holidays. It requires physical resilience. It requires a lot of money, and I think you should write a will before you take part in this activity. However, that makes it still, nonetheless, an attractive business proposition, I think, to many, many, many people.
Does it, though, spell a major problem for example, NASA, the American Space Agency? I mean, this email, for example, from Graham Stewart, who's in Oakland, California. Do you believe NASA is in its twilight after the recent successful launch of White Knight and Spaceship One? What does the future of manned spaceflight look like for NASA when costs continue to soar?
NASA's nowhere near its twilight. I'm not going to defend a large bureaucratic organization. That's not something I feel really
you work for it.
able to do. I don't believe actually I could. NASA's a large government organization and has all of the difficulties that a large bureaucracy takes with it. And large companies have the same issues. However, that's not to say that NASA, or indeed any large government, and I would point to the European Space Agency as actually even being more cumbersome, because of all the countries involved. Nonetheless, these large government agencies can still and will still do very, very fundamental, risky, and we're talking about risk, where the return just isn't there for the businessman, risky adventures that are still of value in terms of exploration. So those will be done by the governments. Now the businessman, if they actually see the risk can still actually earn money and they can still keep the business going after one bad accident, then yes, I think those are going to grow. And they're going to fill a very substantial, today it would be a niche, but soon I think it will be a burgeoning industry.
Is there also, do you think, a possibility that over the coming years, other forms of customer, scientists, for example, who want experiments to be conducted in space, might be tempted to ask a commercial operator to provide the resources to do that rather than a taxpayer-funded one like NASA?
Well, I think that's the right thing to do. That would only keep, especially if they were competitors, that would keep the price down. The trouble with
it would take revenue away from NASA.
Well, NASA's government organizations aren't even allowed to make a profit. Right. That's the sad state of affairs in these ventures, and nor should they really be trying to. They should be taking the high-risk projects where no one can afford to have the accident and then lose all their money on it. A government can because they're doing the boldest things.
We're going to take another call. This one is from Saudi Arabia, Alfred Vuk. Alfred, hello.
Hello, Robin.
Hi, go ahead.
It's really nice to talk to you, Michael. You mentioned flying over Saudi Arabia and seeing flares in the desert. I've actually camped in the desert, in the dunes, seen those flares. They're absolutely beautiful. But it must be even more beautiful from up there. The main question I wanted to ask you about was, and you alluded to it with regards to Spaceship One. As you know, that won the X Prize. Rattan's team won the X Prize recently, and that prize was around for about 7 years. And now a fellow named Bigelow, I think, is putting together a prize. I'm not exactly sure what the prize is called, but I think it'll be worth about $50 million. And he wants to be able to get people to launch into orbit and to his hotels, which are using the SpaceHab technology. I guess the question I'm asking is, how do you think the space station should be used in conjunction with something like an orbiting hotel and private orbital space planes or rocket ships? Should there be some kind of a support role?
Well, you really begged a question there, and it's a very good question. The International Space Station is actually, as I say, it's the government project where the pointy end of the risk is taking place. I believe Mr. Bigelow and maybe a separate commercial space station that's visited on a temporary basis by maybe Soyuz rockets, that could be actually the insurance system for accidents on the International Space Station. Maybe we could have commercial operators acting as the salvage teams that would back up accidents or difficulties in the government program. So then there would be an incentive. There would be, maybe the governments could pay some kind of insurance premium to help fund these venture capital ideas, such as the hotels in space. So there's a lot of, I won't go any further, I don't give you all my ideas away, but there are many ways that we could see a business plan develop where the commercial operators work at the same time as the government operators.
So you don't see commercial operators as a threat to government-funded space operations? You think there is a chance that they could work side by side and cooperate with each other?
Absolutely. In fact, if there was a cheap way to get into orbit, I think NASA should pay for its first spaceflight experiences for astronauts on a commercial vehicle. That's not there today, but that would be something that would be obvious to do. You don't want to waste money.
Staying in the Middle East, we'll go to Nicholas Woodhouse, who's on the line from Oman. Nicholas Woodhouse, hello.
Hi.
Hi, go ahead.
I'm enjoying your program very much.
Thank you.
I've always had an interest in bone metabolism, and in the early days, people reported considerable losses of calcium from the astronaut skeletons. Can I ask you if you have your skeletal calcium checked regularly, and what are you doing to prevent this?
Michael Fole.
Obviously, if we did nothing in space, I'm doing this answering this for other viewers and listeners. If we did nothing in space, my muscles would atrophy, and the gist of the question is I would lose calcium from my bones and have a significant form of osteoporosis, and I would be at great risk of having bone fractures, etc., when coming back to Earth. To combat that, I can tell you we have done some significant improvements on the International Space Station compared to, for example, the Mir station on which I flew earlier. I've come back now with with about the same muscle strength as I left with. My bone density was only down by at the most a few percent in one area, and that was much better than after Mir, and I flew on Mir 1.5 months less than I did on the International Space Station, which was 6.5 months. So we've definitely made some steps. I know after Mir, after 2 years, I have my bone density checked once every 6 months. I basically got all of the bone density that I had before the Mir flight back. I expect, I'm back now 6 months from my flight on the International Space Station, and I have not had it checked yet at the 6-month point. But I'm fully expect it to be coming back about 1% every 6 months, and to be back where I was in about 2 years.
If a doctor were to examine you not knowing what you did for a living and where you had spent a substantial part of your life over the last few years, would he be able to tell just by examining you?
No, he wouldn't. He wouldn't be able to tell. As it turns out, I'm fortunate in being part of the population that has very high bone density. So where I ended up after the space station flight was right in the middle of the population for my age range.
Here's a question. We've been talking about commercial space travel. Jonathan, who's a 13-year-old emailer in Tewkesbury here in England, what's the thing you worry about most going into space?
Well, it's making a mistake or disappointing people. It's performance anxiety. It's the same as an actor on a stage.
That more than the risk of not coming back?
Oh, yes, much, much more. You don't really think about not coming back. That's not something you should think about. It will just put you in depression, make you nervous, panic, and you'd be very ineffective in your job. And I obviously don't have a tendency towards that depression because I've done fairly well. So you put that aside and you just worry about not disappointing the people who have a stake in you. You don't want to ruin the experiment of that scientist and that team that have put it together for 4 years and launched it, and then they see you mess it up. You do not want to do that. And so you're paying a lot of attention and you're being very careful to do exactly what they want. You don't want to break anything because you know the effort that went into getting things up there. That's my anxiety. And most recently on this flight, one other thing, it's a human thing. I did not want to come back enemies with my crewmate. I did not want to have any falling out with my crew member. Sash and I talked about it. He's a very experienced cosmonaut, flown 600 days in space now. And when I was announced the commander of our crew after the Columbia tragedy, I found Sasha and I said, Sasha, you know what I'm most worried about communicating to you. I'm not worried about it. I need you to understand that if I do anything to annoy you or irritate you, you must tell me. And the same, I will do the same for you. And we'll do it right up front. And we will address all of our difficulties immediately.
And did you?
And actually, we never had to. Because we'd even had this, and he completely understood what I was talking about. He saw it the same way I did. So what happened is that we were, ironically, far more attentive to each other than we would be to our own wives.
We've had a lot of emails from children. This is because we put on the children's BBC website that you were going to be on this programme, a website at bbcnews.com/cbbc News. This is another one. It's a question I suspect probably more than any other single question that people would want to ask you, but it took 13-year-old Jay in Sydney, Australia. How do you go to the toilet in space?
Well, unfortunately, there's a certain amount of detail I can't go into. But the principle, the toilet actually looks pretty much like one you would find on the street in one of those little square boxes, portaloos. But because of the weightlessness, droplets, fluids don't go anywhere. They just float and will disperse and form a shower. So we need airflow to pull air through a big hose with a funnel on it. And that collects the urine. We also use airflow to collect everything else into a can. And really beyond that, we put it...
So not as difficult as people might imagine, it would seem.
It's just time-consuming.
Right. Okay. We've had another question that's come in to us on tape. Let's hear that one.
Hello, Michael. Mike from Lancashire at Science Museum, Kensington. Just wondering, I remember sitting around the little black and white television in 1969 watching the first moon landing. I was wondering if you were, what you were doing at that time and when you actually first got interested in space as a career.
Do you remember watching Neil Armstrong?
I was actually in Torquay, I think, at school with my, on a school break on the weekend, I think it was, with my grandparents. Down in Devon, and I remember it extraordinarily well. It had a profound effect on me. I was already interested in spaceflight. I'd become aware of John Glenn's flights and the X-15 flights in America, but this really fired up my attention. And it was just one of those really important moments in my life. And I remember those snowy black and white. And I remember looking at those images thinking, is that really on the moon? You know, is that
well,
really
as you know, there are some people who still
coming down the stairs.
And was it at that moment that you said, I want to go up there?
No, it wasn't then. As I say, I'd already decided that before the lunar landings. Apollo 8 had a very profound effect on me. Apollo 8 was the decision made only one flight after the terrible fire where 3 astronauts were burned to death on the launch pad in an Apollo Saturn rocket. Only one flight after that, they made the decision to go to the moon and go around it and come back, but without a lunar landing module. And it was a very, very risky and brave decision of all of the NASA people to do that.
There was a whole long period when they were round the back and nobody knew if they were going to re-emerge.
Right, it's about 30 minutes around the backside of the moon. And it took place over Christmas, so people were more aware of risk and family and adventure, I think, at that time.
This is a call that's coming to us from the Philippines. Kenna Corneta is on the line. Kenna, hello?
Hello?
Hi, can you hear us?
Yes. Hello, Michael.
Yeah, go
Hello.
ahead, Kenna.
Hello?
Hello.
Hello, Michael. I'm just wondering what sort of food do you eat in space? And I could also ask that, is there any chances that kids like me can go to space? And is it hard to be an astronaut?
Let me just ask you, Kenna, how old are you?
I'm 14 years old, sir.
You're 14. Do you want to be an astronaut?
Yes.
Okay, so what kind of food do you eat, Michael, and how do you become an astronaut?
Well, my favorite food in space is chocolate, and I took a lot of extra chocolate because I like it so much. Actually, the other most favorite food is a form of nuts and cheese that that the Russians make. Beyond that, it's meat and potatoes, pretty regular stuff with vegetables mashed in, and I enjoy those too. Yes, I think you will have a chance to fly in space if you want to do it. I think actually it'll be with the commercial companies, the Spaceship 1, Spaceship 2, and by the time you've earned enough money for the ticket, Spaceship 10, you will be able to buy tickets probably to orbit. If not, you'll be able to buy a cheaper ticket to do what Spaceship 1 did, which is to go into space, see the atmosphere get thinner, see the black of space, see the curve of the blue Earth, float a little bit for about 6 minutes in zero gravity, and then come back to Earth after only an hour's flight total. It'll be a rough and violent ride, but that flight will be something that's accessible, I think, to people very soon, for about the price of mortgaging your house.
Another child's question for you. Sarah, who's 13 in Cardiff. Do you believe in extraterrestrial life?
Believing is too religious when I say that. I would be dumbfounded if you know, I went to the pearly gates and they said, no, there isn't any.
Somewhere, something out there is living.
Yes, yes, absolutely. And it's to do with just my background as a physicist, as a knowledge of how life probably arose on this Earth. When you put all those together, the planetary systems that are being discovered by the Hubble Space Telescope and other telescopes now around the world, more than 100 planetary systems have been discovered around stars in the last few years. The chance of there not being life on other planets seems to me infinitesimally small.
Lots of other questions I would love to ask you, but we're nearly out of time. Final, brief last question. As you circle the Earth and you look down on this planet, do you ever look down and say, that looks nice, I want to go there?
Absolutely. The place I've paid most attention to is the southern hemisphere. Patagonia, the glaciers that run all the way down the ridge of the Andes there, down to Tierra del Fuego. They just conjure up all kinds of feelings. I've started to do ice climbing, and also South Georgia.
We'll have to give you a chance to go there. Michael Fold, that is all we have time for. Thank you very much indeed for being with us, and thanks to everybody who's joined us on the programme. Keep sending your emails, talkingpoint@bbc.co.uk. From me, Robin Lustig, for now, goodbye.
Himmelsscheibe von Nebra. Ist sie nur die älteste Sternenkarte Europas oder was zeigt sie wirklich? 2 Jahre nach ihrer Entdeckung präsentiert das Landesmuseum für Vorgeschichte von Sachsen-Anhalt nun eine spektakuläre Antwort. Auf der 30 cm großen Metallscheibe ist zu sehen, wie sich die Mitteleuropäer 1600 Jahre vor der Zeitrechnung die Welt vorstellten.
Neu ist, dass wir überhaupt ein Weltbild des vorgeschichtlichen Menschen haben. Denn vorgeschichtliche Menschen schreiben ja nichts, hinterlassen ihre Philosophien, ihre Gedanken, ihre Weltbilder nicht der Nachwelt. Höchstens in Bildern, und die fehlten bislang. Hier haben wir solch ein Bild, und das Erstaunliche ist, dass es eben in dieser frühen Zeit offenbar schon so ausgeprägt ist als hemisphärisches Weltbild, wie es dann bis in die frühe Neuzeit gilt.
Die Erde als Scheibe, umgeben von einem kosmischen Ozean und überspannt von einer Himmelskugel. Die Darstellung dokumentiert ein Weltbild, wie es unseres bisherigen Wissens nach durch den Griechen Thales von Milet begründet wurde. Aber das war 1000 Jahre später. Unser Bild vom Vorzeitmenschen müssen wir gründlich revidieren. Die mitteleuropäischen Astronomen der Bronzezeit waren exakte Naturwissenschaftler. Die Himmelsscheibe ist der Beleg fortgeschrittener Kenntnisse und einer genauen Himmelsbeobachtung. Keine Spur von mythischer Verfremdung, wie sie anderenorts noch lange üblich war.
Das heißt, wir haben hier ein gleichsam rationales, kaltes, fast schon mathematisches Weltbild vor uns. Und das erscheint uns sehr modern und sehr ungewöhnlich.
Noch andere einzigartige Fundstücke wie die Goldschiffchen von Norse und der Sonnenwagen von Trondholm aus Dänemark bilden einen eindrucksvollen Rahmen für die Himmelsscheibe. Aufwendige Installationen machen das Weltbild unserer Vorfahren in der Ausstellung geradezu physisch erlebbar. Der geschmiedete Himmel bis April 2005 in Halle.
Und es gibt auch ein Buch zur Ausstellung. Der geschmiedete Himmel ist der Titel. Es ist erschienen im Theis Verlag und kostet bis März 2005 24,90 € als Einführungspreis. Danach wird es 5 € teurer.
Good evening, everyone. This is Mission Control Houston. You're looking at the International Space Station Flight Control Room from the back of the room, looking forward as a team of flight controllers here with great anticipation watches over the final minutes of a countdown toward the launch of the Expedition 10 crew to the International Space Station. This is our live coverage of that launch with the launch countdown clock counting backward. We're about 50 minutes and 40 seconds away from liftoff of the Soyuz rocket, which is poised on the launch pad at the Baikonur Cosmodrome in Kazakhstan, about 1,200 miles to the southeast of Moscow. The weather conditions at the launch site, as you can see from this beautiful view, looking toward the northeast after sunrise, with the launch conditions there with the temperatures in the 30s, partly cloudy skies, near perfect conditions for launch this morning of the Expedition 10 crew, along with cosmonaut Yuri Shargin, who will join the Expedition 10 crew for the launch and return home with the Expedition 9 crew. Aboard the Soyuz rocket, astronaut and Expedition 10 commander Leroy Chow, along with Expedition 10 Soyuz commander and flight engineer Salizan Sharipov. And again, as mentioned just a moment ago, Yuri Shargin will launch with the Expedition 10 crew and then return home with the Expedition 9 crew. At the end of the 10-day mission, the handover, Expedition 9 crew members Gennady Padalka, the commander, and Mike Fink, the onboard NASA ISS science officer and flight engineer, will return home on the 23rd of this month. The Soyuz rocket was put together there at the launch site and transported on a back of a rail car to the launch site about 3 days ago. It actually was transported to the launch pad at dawn yesterday, that's Tuesday morning, and was then erected vertically. It's a 162-foot tall rocket weighing about 680,000 pounds at liftoff. The pad on which this Soyuz rocket now stands was used 43 years ago to support the launch of Yuri Gagarin in April 1967. Of course, the first human that was launched into space from this very launch pad. After launch this morning, again with clocks counting backward, 48 minutes to launch, Sharipov as Soyuz commander and Leroy Chiao as the onboard Soyuz flight engineer will oversee several of the orbital correction burns using the onboard thrusters to adjust the Soyuz's spacecraft in relation to that of the International Space Station, basically slowly matching the orbit of the International Space Station, leading to the docking and the hatch opening, which occurs 2 days from now. The current targeted docking time is Friday night Houston time at 11:25 p.m. That's 12:25 a.m. in the wee hours Saturday morning Eastern time. The Expedition 9 crew on board is about 3.5 hours away from being awakened for its next workday. At present, the crew is in its 178th day in space, 176 of those aboard the International Space Station. Mike Fink on the left and Gennady Padalka on the right in this picture. And again, they are about a little more than midway through their sleep shift, so they will not be awake officially for the launch tonight. Tonight marks the fourth flight into space for Leroy Chiao. It's the second flight for Salizan Sharipov. Shargin will be making his first trip into space tonight. The mission actually launches under the call sign Tian Shan, which is a mountain range that spans over Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, and China. Kyrgyzstan is near Sharipov's hometown. Tian Shan is the words that mean heavenly mountain, and that is the call sign that the crew members will be using for the ascent tonight. This view, Sharipov in the center and Leroy Chiao on the right in this view, and Yuri Shargin on the left in this view. Again, Shargin will launch with this crew and return home 10 days from now with Expedition 9. In preparation for launch, the crew woke up about 8.5 hours prior to launch. The wake-up time actually was about 1:30 this afternoon Central Time, 2:30 Eastern Time. That time at the launch site was actually about 12:30 in the morning Baikonur time at the launch site. The traditional activities, a pretty standard timeline for crews launching aboard Soyuz rockets. The cosmonaut hotel in which they reside for the final days of their preparation for launch This crew actually traveled to the launch site a bit earlier than usual, about 10 days prior to launch, as a number of training activities that the crew undertook leading up to tonight's launch. Sharipov and Leroy Chow signing the door, a tradition, signing the door there at the Cosmonaut Hotel before they depart for the Building 254, which is basically where their suit-up takes place. The departure from the Cosmonaut Hotel occurred about 7 hours prior to launch. That's about 3 o'clock this afternoon Central Time, about 2 o'clock in the morning Baikonur time.
Так, все, освобождаем дорогу. Ладно, все, мужики. Так, ну-ка, дайте пройти. Все. Солдатики, присели. Ребят, дайте пройти. Все. Солдатики, присели. Ребят, дайте пройти. Серега, давай трогай. Пиздец какой-то, ёб твою мать-то.
And the crew arrived at the Medical Operations Building, Building 254, obviously climbed into their launch and entry suits, the Sokol suits as they're known, an extensive check of the pressure in the suits as well as all of the functions of the suit prior to departure for the launch pad. Some of those checks included the communications checks, the pressure checks, and also all of the medical parameters that are tracked with the crew members during the launch phase. The launch suit up lasted about a little more than an hour or so from start to finish, and began about a little less than 5 hours prior to launch. That occurred about 4 o'clock in the morning local time there at the launch site at Baikonur. That translates to a suit-up time of a little after 5 o'clock this afternoon Central Time, a little after 6 p.m. Eastern Time. Crew was joined by its backup crew, Bill MacArthur, U.S. astronaut there, serving as a backup crew member, along with Valery Tokarev, who is standing there next to him. Again, Tokarev and MacArthur serving as the backup crew for Expedition 10. Leroy Chow, thumbs up, ready for completion of his suit checks, and also ready for his fourth flight into space this evening. And again, the crew continued to go through pressure checks on the suits to ensure a good integrity of the pressure in those suits, along with the communication systems prior to the next step, which was to depart the medical ops building, the suit-up building, and head over to a meeting with directors and other delegates awaiting the launch of Expedition 10 this evening. And the service towers around the Soyuz rocket begin to retract, approaching 38 minutes and counting to the launch of the Soyuz carrying Expedition 10 to the International Space Station. Again, the weather at the launch site, temperature in the 30s. It's an early morning launch, as you can see, with this beautiful view looking toward the northeast of the Baikonur Cosmodrome, a launch facility in southern Kazakhstan that stretches from about 95 kilometers or so by about 70 kilometers, a fairly sprawling complex supporting not only Soyuz launches but also Proton launches carrying larger spacecraft. And the report to the head of the government commission coming 3 hours prior to launch, about 7 o'clock this evening Central Time, about 6 a.m. local there at the Baikonur Cosmodrome. And the Expedition 10 crew, along with Yuri Shargin, departing for the launch pad. They arrived at the launch pad about 2 hours, 40 minutes prior to launch. That's about 7:30 this evening Central Time, about 6:30 in the morning Baikonur time. A crowd gathered at the base of the rocket as the crew members climbed the stairs in preparation for boarding the elevator for the ride to the top of the Soyuz rocket, the capsule. Again, the rocket stands 162 feet tall. Yuri Shargin at the top in this view, in the center, Salizhan Sharipov, and Leroy Chiao, U.S. astronaut who will serve as the commander of Expedition 10, prepare to head up to the capsule to board the Soyuz rocket for the final hours of the countdown. They began boarding the Soyuz about 2.5 hours prior to launch. And once the crew was on board, now with a live view from the Baikonur Cosmodrome, we've just gotten a report in the last few minutes that the Soyuz rocket is now on its internal battery. Some of the other milestones in the last couple of hours have included the activation of systems for the health checks of the onboard radio communications systems, the thermal control system, and also the motion control systems. The countdown clock stands at 29 minutes, 30 seconds and counting to launch. A NASA contingent is in Baikonur that includes Public Affairs Officer Rob Navius, who filed a report earlier today.
For the fourth time in less than 2 years, an American astronaut is buttoned up inside a Russian Soyuz spacecraft just over a mile from where we stand, ready to lift off with Russian cosmonauts to the International Space Station. Out at Site 254 on the same pad from which Yuri Gagarin first launched over 43 years ago to begin the era of human spaceflight, Leroy Chiao, Salizhan Sharipov, and Yuri Shargin are in the final stages of their pre-launch checkout of their capsule systems as their booster rocket stands fully fueled to begin the expedition crew's 2-day chase to reach the International Space Station. Today's launch culminates 10 days of final preparations here at the Baikonur Cosmodrome for Chiao, Sharipov, and Shargin. They arrived earlier than usual from their training base at Star City outside Moscow, combining their dress rehearsal of launch activities with the normal complement of final inspections of their Soyuz capsule, reviews of their flight plan, and traditional pre-launch ceremonies. Sharipov, as Soyuz commander, is strapped into the center seat of the Soyuz Tma capsule. Chiao, as flight engineer number 1, is in the left seat, and Shargin, as flight engineer number 2, is located in the right seat of the spacecraft. With space shuttles grounded until at least next spring, the Soyuz is the ticket for American astronauts to fly to the International Space Station under the partnership with the Russian Federal Space Agency and the other international partners. Here in Baikonur, preparations for this launch have been ongoing for several months, and with all of the technical reviews having been completed, the Soyuz and its crew were cleared for launch in the wee hours this morning by the Russian State Commission, chaired by the head of the Federal Space Agency, Anatoly Perminov. NASA is represented here today by Deputy Administrator Fred Gregory, Michael Kostelnik, the Associate Administrator for Space Shuttle and Space Station, and International Space Station Deputy Program Manager Mike Suffredini. Here at this barren and remote site in the Central Asian desert, the crew has been busy throughout the pre-dawn hours with its final ritual of meetings with top Russian space officials, Russian and American flight surgeons, final pre-launch physicals, suit-up activities, and the customary bus ride to the launch pad, past the cottages where Yuri Gagarin and the iconic great designer Sergei Korolyov slept on the eve of Gagarin's historic launch into space. The ground track for the Expedition 10 crew members will take them north-northeast from the launch pad here at Baikonur over a series of Kazakh and Russian ground stations stretching almost to the Chinese-Mongolian border. A team of Russian search and recovery helicopters will be airborne a short time from now, if needed, in the unlikely event a contingency arises. But everything is in good shape here at the launch site as the countdown continues flawlessly toward today's start to the 10th expedition to the International Space Station. From the Baikonur Cosmodrome in Kazakhstan, back to you at Mission Control in Houston.
And that was Rob Navius from the Baikonur Cosmodrome earlier this evening. The 3 stages of the Soyuz booster are liquid fueled. They have kerosene as their propellant. The first stage has 4 liquid engines that are strapped to the side of the core vehicle. Each of those will burn for about 1 minute 58 seconds during first stage. The core engine of the first stage also will serve as the second stage and will continue to burn until about the 4 minute 58 second point during launch this evening. The third stage has a single engine that will burn for about 4 minutes or so, shutting down at about the 9-minute mark of the flight, which will put the spacecraft in a highly elliptical orbit of about 143 miles by 118 miles, which is about 230 by 189 kilometers. Atop the Soyuz rocket is the Soyuz Tma Spacecraft. It's a 23.5-foot-long vehicle that weighs about 15,800 pounds. It has 3 separate modules. At the top is the orbital module, also known as the habitation module. At the bottom is the instrumentation propulsion module, and in between is the descent module. That's the module in which the 3 crew members are currently positioned ready for launch. After the spacecraft reaches orbits, the solar array wings are deployed, and they span about 35 feet or so. The entire spacecraft is actually housed inside a protective shroud at the top of the rocket, and that shroud is jettisoned about 3 minutes or so into launch. Again, the 3 modules, the top module, the crew uses the habitation module during on-orbit operations. That module only separates from the other 2 modules after the deorbit burn at the completion of the spacecraft's mission. The descent module, the one in which the crew members reside, has personally contoured couches for each crew member. Those are used during launch, re-entry, and landing. This module contains all of the controls and displays for all of the flight activities, and also contains life support provisions for the crew members and the parachutes and landing retro rockets that are used at touchdown. The bottom portion, the instrumentation propulsion module, houses the oxygen storage tanks, also the attitude control thrusters, avionics, and the communications and control equipment. The propulsion compartment of this module handles all of the orbital maneuvers, including the rendezvous with the International Space Station, and also for the deorbit burn at the end of the spacecraft mission. The solar arrays are tucked against the body of this module, and it also separates from the crew module, the descent module, after the deorbit burn, just like the habitation module does. About 45 minutes ago, the onboard timing device was initiated that basically governs the final major events that lead up to the liftoff. The Soyuz rocket is the same type of launch vehicle that's been used in various configurations to launch satellites since 1963. It was first used as a crew transport back in 1967, and this rocket now stands poised to deliver Expedition 10 toward the International Space Station for the next 6 months.
Like the 3 teams that came before them, the commander and flight engineer on the International Space Station's 10th expedition crew have a special job to do.
As you know, since the Columbia tragedy, we've been flying 2-person crews to the station, and the primary goals of those crews has been to keep the station going by doing repairs, on-orbit maintenance, and also, in the meantime, performing different experiments, as well as performing some assembly tasks as well.
For their 6 months on orbit, Chow and his crewmate, Salijan Sharipov, have a full agenda of activities that will support extending the scope of space exploration beyond Earth orbit.
We have a huge flight program that includes over 100 experiments, science experiments, including EVAs. 2 progressors should visit us, and 2 crew members will be performing all these activities. Probably will be very busy, and I understand the time will fly.
The station's central role in realizing the vision for space exploration is that of a test bed to understand what happens to people who spend extended periods of time in weightlessness, as the people who explore the Moon and Mars will do in coming years. Chow and Sharipov are subjects for more than half a dozen experiments to learn specifically how the human body fares in microgravity, so the people planning the return to the Moon and the months-long voyages to Mars can give the human crews what they need to remain happy and healthy. One of those experiments is called Foot.
I'll be instrumented, and they'll be able to measure my leg muscles and my leg joints, and to see how I differently use those joints and muscles on the Earth and in space. And through those correlations, we'll better understand what kind of exercise we'll be needing to do to keep a crew healthy during a long-duration voyage to Mars, things like that.
During their 6 months in space, Expedition 10 will be the operators for more than a dozen other investigations, both American and Russian, that are designed to take advantage of microgravity.
One very interesting experiment is called SRS, which is a low-temperature synthesis in space, high technologies that would allow us to develop new materials. We are performing such experiments that would help humanity to live better and progress.
Chow and Sharipov are trained to make spacewalks using American spacesuits. But the plan is for 2 EVAs, both out of the Russian Pirs docking compartment, wearing Russian Orlan spacesuits.
The first spacewalk will be for installation of the universal work space on the service module and installation of Rukvis experiment, which is a joint experiment for the European Space Agency and Russia.
On that EVA, the first of his career, Sharipov will be accompanied by one of the most experienced spacewalkers in history. Chow has more than 26 hours spacewalk time from the first 4 EVAs of his career, including 2 on the mission that delivered and installed the station's Z1 truss segment. In a first for Chow, on this mission's second spacewalk,
we'll be working on the Russian segment, installing antennas and other equipment in support of the European ATV, the cargo transfer vehicle. And so we'll be, in our small way, kind of continuing the construction of the space station.
That automated European cargo ship is targeted for its first flight late next year. The Expedition 10 crew members, who expect to be the last 2-man crew in the post-Columbia era, are proud to be keeping the International Space Station ready to support a return to a full crew complement as the next step in achieving the vision for space exploration.
We are out there doing scientific experiments, and we're performing research that can't be done on the ground. In addition, I mean, we are learning on how to build and maintain a spacecraft for a long duration. If we're going to go to the Moon and Mars, we're going to have to know how, the weak points of a spacecraft and what we need to kind of improve, and how we need to plan to do maintenance and things like that. And the space station is an ideal platform for that kind of work.
And back at the launch site, the countdown clock counting backwards, 17 minutes, 10 seconds to launch. Tonight's launch is precisely timed for the rendezvous and docking with the International Space Station 2 days from now. At the time of tonight's launch, the International Space Station will be above West Central Africa, traveling northeasterly. The Soyuz's telemetry systems and steering jets have now been activated, and during the climb to orbit, the tracking and telemetry is downlinked to several ground stations along the flight path and then routed to the Mission Control Center in Korolyov, which is outside Moscow. There, the Russian flight director oversees his group of flight controllers ready to begin monitoring the Soyuz following the launch and insertion into orbit. There's a group of Moscow-based U.S. controllers that are known as the Houston Support Group. They are led this evening by Keith Zimmerman. They're also joined by veteran NASA Flight Director Sally Davis, along with astronaut Ed Lu, who is a qualified Soyuz flight engineer and served aboard Expedition 7. Back here in Mission Control, a team of about 20 flight controllers is watching over the International Space Station 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, in conjunction with those counterparts in Moscow. At present time, the station is traveling at an altitude of about 230 statute miles above the southern Atlantic Ocean, traveling on the dark side of the Earth, headed toward the northeast. Overseeing activities here is International Space Station Flight Director Annette Hasbrook. She will shortly hand over to her colleague, Flight Director Jeff Hanley. She also will be serving as the lead station flight director for the Expedition 10 six-month increment aboard this station. 15 minutes, 5 seconds and counting to the launch of Expedition 10 from the Baikonur Cosmodrome in Kazakhstan. After launch, the next 2 days will be spent watching over the rendezvous of the Soyuz with the International Space Station, leading to the docking, which currently is targeted for 11:25 Central Time on Friday. That docking will be followed by the opening of the hatches between the two spacecraft, which will mark the start of an 8-day shift change or handover between the Expedition 10 crew and the Expedition 9 crew. Again, the Expedition 10 crew, along with Yuri Shargin, have been aboard the Soyuz spacecraft now for about 2 hours, a little more than 2 hours, conducting the final systems checks with the Russian launch controllers. This is an experienced astronaut and cosmonaut crew that combines for four previous space missions totaling 46 days. This mission will be each's first long-duration spaceflight. And aboard the Soyuz rocket now, looking at Yuri Shargin on about to make his first voyage into space. In the center in the center seat is Salizhan Sharipov, who is the flight engineer for Expedition 10, but he's the Soyuz commander for this evening's launch. Countdown clock counting backward, 8 minutes, 30 seconds to launch. Out of view in this picture is Leroy Chow. He's to the left of Sharipov, to the right in this picture out of view. Engineers continue to monitor all of the systems aboard the Soyuz rocket along with the crew as it's set to begin its voyage to space in 8 minutes and counting. The official launch time this evening is 10:06 and 26 seconds Central Time, or 9:06 and 26 seconds a.m. local there at the Baikonur Cosmodrome. A short while ago, some commands were sent to switch the power from the ground sources to the Soyuz's onboard batteries, as mentioned earlier. And after reaching orbit, the Soyuz's command and control system will be activated, and some stored computer commands will then deploy the communications antenna. The first of those several antennas will be the Kurs rendezvous and docking antenna. That will be used to provide the automatic range rate information during the final approach to docking with the International Space Station. Just after reaching orbit, the spacecraft's solar arrays will be deployed. They will be used to collect solar power for use by those batteries on board the Soyuz spacecraft that will generate the electricity for all of the equipment. About 90 minutes or so into the mission after launch, the crew will oversee the programmed activation sequence of all of the systems on board the Soyuz as it makes its first pass over Russian ground stations. Some of those systems activations include the power supply system, the radio communication system, and also the critical motion control system. In the wee hours tomorrow, the motion control system will establish the stable orientation for the Soyuz as it begins its two-day chase to rendezvous and dock with the International Space Station. On the launch pad there at the Baikonur Cosmodrome, the countdown is proceeding. The launch count, 6 minutes, 5 seconds and counting to launch. At this point, the Soyuz spacecraft, or the Soyuz rocket's first stage steering jets are in the ready-to-launch position, and the ground commands have been received from the rocket that indicates all of the control and auxiliary systems are ready for launch. Coming up on T-minus 5 minutes and 30 seconds to launch, the launch control reports that the range at the Baikonur Cosmodrome is clear and the Soyuz rocket is ready to begin its journey. Just under 5 minutes to launch now. All of the onboard systems have been switched to onboard control. The Soyuz commander, Salizhan Sharipov, his controls have been activated. The crew members should be closing their helmet visors, which also puts them on suit oxygen. And the recording devices on board to record all of the ascent data have been activated as well. T-minus 4 minutes, 20 seconds and counting. Three minutes, 30 seconds to launch. At this point, a nitrogen purge of the engine combustion chambers is underway. All continuing to go smoothly, counting down to launch of Expedition 10, along with Russian cosmonaut Yuri Shargin, who will launch with Expedition 10 and return home 10 days from now with Expedition 9. The second onboard recorder has been activated. 2 minutes, 55 seconds and counting. Two minutes, 30 seconds to launch. At this point, the booster tanks are being pressurized for flight.
Everything is fine. On board, sealing well. Copy that. Waiting.
2 minutes and counting. All systems still go for launch. Inside a minute and a half to launch. The Soyuz is now on internal power. The automatic launch sequencer is on. One minute to launch.
Земля, борт.
40 seconds. The first umbilical tower separating from the launch vehicle. 30 seconds to launch of the 10th expedition crew to the International Space Station. Fifteen seconds. The second umbilical tower moving away from the rocket. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We have ignition of the main stage. And we have liftoff of a Soyuz rocket carrying Expedition 10 on her trip to the International Space Station for the next 6 months. Seconds into launch, the Soyuz rocket is already 3 miles in altitude, downrange a half a mile from the launch site, all continuing to go smoothly in the initial stages of ascent this evening. One minute into the flight, the Soyuz is already traveling 600 miles per hour. And the vehicle is passed through a region of maximum aerodynamic pressure. 1 minute, 25 seconds. Aboard the spacecraft, Leroy Chow in the top right of the picture on his 4th voyage into space. Commander of the Soyuz, Salizhan Sharipov, there in the center. 1 minute 58 seconds, standing by for first stage separation. First stage separation confirmed. The vehicle's traveling 3,900 miles per hour, downrange from the launch site 29 miles at an altitude of 28 miles now. All continue to be reported normal as the ascent approaches a 3-minute mark. Three minutes into the flight, the Soyuz is at an altitude of 50 miles, downrange from the launch site 72 miles, traveling 5,000 miles per hour.
На борту порядок самочувствия у экипажа в норме. Принято. Наблюдем. Тяньшань 3. Секунд, полет нормально. Двигатель работает устойчиво.
3 minutes, 30 seconds. Altitude's now 66 miles, downrange 72 miles, approaching 6,000 miles per hour. All continuing to go smoothly. Yuri Shargin on his first voyage into space this morning.
Секунд стабилизации изделия устойчиво.
4 minutes, 5 seconds into the flight, 84 miles in altitude, 208 miles now downrange, traveling 7,070 miles per hour. Approaching 4.5 minutes into the flight, about 20 seconds remaining in the second stage. Standing by for confirmation of second stage separation.
Есть запах третьей ступени. Есть отделение второй ступени. Команду порядок самочувствия в норме.
Landing final port ceiling Welt. Copy.
Confirmation of second stage separation, 5 minutes, 30 seconds into the flight. Soyuz spacecraft now 113 miles in altitude, 440 miles from the launch site, traveling nearly 10,000 miles per hour now.
The thrusters are working in order. Seconds in flight, nominal flight.
6 minutes into the flight, about 3 minutes remaining in powered flight.
Your roll and pitch are nominal. Just the same. Everything is in order on board. The crew is feeling fine. Copy.
6 minutes, 30 seconds into the flight. Altitude's now 120 miles. Downrange from the launch site, 580 miles, traveling 11,200 miles per hour.
400 seconds in flight. Stable nominal parameters. 410 seconds nominal flight.
Salizhan Sharipov in the center, Leroy Chow in the top right of the picture. A smooth ride this morning, approaching 7 minutes and 30 seconds into the flight. Altitude's now 124 statute miles, downrange from the launch site 750 miles, approaching speed of 13,000 miles per hour.
Полет нормальный.
450 seconds nominal flight.
Секунд, двигатель третьей ступени работает нормально.
470 seconds. Thrusters of the third stage working nominally. The situation on board is in order and the crew is feeling fine. Copy.
A little less than a minute remaining in powered flight. The Soyuz spacecraft is now 125 miles above the Earth. Downrange from the launch site 940 miles, traveling 15,200 miles per hour. standing by for confirmation of third stage engine cutoff. That should come at 8 minutes 45 seconds, about 5 seconds from now.
420. 520. Control system in order. We have a separation. Copy.
8 minutes 57 seconds into the launch, we have confirmation of the Soyuz spacecraft separation from the launch vehicle.
The separation nominal is everything fine on board and feeling fine. Tianshan. Tianshan, how do you copy? Tianshan, this is 10. How do you copy?
Tianshan, meaning heavenly mountains, the call sign for this Soyuz mission to the International Space Station. The floating object indicating that the crew members have achieved microgravity, zero gravity.
Moscow, how do you read? Tianshan.
Floating object, actually the cartoon character Felix the Cat, a favorite cartoon character of Sharipov's daughter.
Copy.
Thumbs up from Leroy Chow, his fourth trip into orbit. Sharipov on his second mission into space, out of view. Yuri Shargin, his first taste of microgravity environment of space. And again, over the course of the next 90 minutes or so, a systematic activation of systems on board the vehicle will commence.
Read you, but you're breaking up. The pressure is fine. The separation was nominal. We started the timer. The pressure in the descent module is 789. Copy.
Reading down parameters ensuring the integrity of the pressure aboard the spacecraft as the crew members now settle in for post-insertion systematic activation of systems on board the Soyuz. That will occur over the course of the next 90 minutes or so while the crew members circle the Earth for the first time and come around within range of Russian ground stations to gather data on all of the spacecraft systems. Their first in a series of rendezvous burns toward the International Space Station will occur a little less than 3 hours from now at about 1:41 tomorrow morning Central Time. Will be a 12.5 meter per second burn. That will be followed a little less than an hour later by the second rendezvous burn, the final one, actually the final one of the day in terms of the middle of the night for the crew. That's a very small 3 meter per second burn. And then another burn late at night Thursday Central Time, just before midnight. Will continue the chase of the Soyuz and Expedition 10 toward the International Space Station.
Read you somewhat. Not well at all. But we read you that you're deactivating TV. Actually, TV deactivation will be via command link at 06-3550. 3550, copy that. And 06-2550. Copy that. How are you doing? Feeling well.
Leroy Chow, commander of Expedition 10. back into space 10 years after his first space shuttle flight ended, which ended in August of 1994. He's back in space now, headed for a long-duration voyage aboard the International Space Station.
Not make too many movements over there.
All continue to go smoothly after this this morning's launch from the Baikonur Cosmodrome. All went very smoothly with the ascent. Recapping, the launch occurred on time at 10:06 and 26 seconds this evening Central Time. That's 9:06 and 26 seconds in the morning Baikonur time in Kazakhstan.
This view coming from an engineering camera, black and white camera on the Soyuz vehicle with the engineering overlay showing for Russian flight controllers here in Korolyov all of the parameters of the range between the Soyuz and the International Space Station and the rate of closure, which is now about 4 meters per second.
Or off, OFF.
Because this approach is in darkness at the moment, sunrise will be coming up, orbital sunrise, at about 9 minutes after the hour. At this point, there are lights, as you can see, illuminating the International Space Station as a reference point for Solyuzhan Sharipov on the Soyuz Tma 5.
Could you switch to wide angle lens, please? Yeah, let's do that. Wide angle. Yes, wide angle. R7 as the command. Okay, yes, we see it. Yes, Romeo 7. Okay, we have Romeo 7.
Yes, sir.
$750.
Yes, sir.
We have Gerso.
Yes, SKD.
SKDs are on. A copy. 2.5, 3. 3.5. 4.4. Beno is 4.2. Please monitor reverse rotation. Please monitor in the periscope and on the display. We see it. Yes, and we see the station as well now. Very good. It should get closer to the center.
$500.
500 range. And next we're going to switch to page 67 and work that procedure. Is that correct, Igor Ivanovich? Yes, that's correct.
In this view that you're seeing, the
next, right?
rotating object in the upper right-hand corner of your screen is the Kurs automated rendezvous antenna on the Soyuz vehicle. As it looks toward the International Space Station, the Kurs is basically reflecting navigational data to a comparable system on the Zvezda service module and the Russian segment of the station, so that the Soyuz and the ISS basically are communicating with one another for this pre-programmed automated approach of the Soyuz Tma 5 for its docking.
Yes, go ahead and do that.
The fly around to the International Space Station underway. We should be reaching the station keeping point for the Soyuz about 190 meters directly behind the Pirs docking compartment, just about 4 minutes from now.
00. Dampening. 00. 31002, right? 1. 14.
Just 20 minutes until docking. The Soyuz is just 330 meters or so away from the International Space Station. So far, a flawless approach by Solyuzhan Sharipov and his crewmates, Expedition 10 Commander Leroy Chow and Yuri Shargin, the Russian Space Forces cosmonaut, who is flying a short-duration mission to return home on October 24th with the Expedition 9 crew.
90060.
Есть.
Has been executed. Okay, so you have started the fly around then. Should begin any minute. And the recording mode has been activated, and we're seeing the station.
Again, the fly around by the Soyuz well underway as the space station grows ever larger. As we approach orbital sunrise, the docking will take place over Central Asia at an altitude of about 225 statute miles, putting 3 Russian vehicles at the International Space Station, 2 Soyuz vehicles, and 1 Progress resupply ship.
Depots are on.
154 meters away between Soyuz and the station, closing at a rate of about 1.5 meters per second. At the time of contact and capture, the Soyuz will approach the station and the Pirs docking compartment for its link-up at a very glacial speed of about 1/10 of a meter per second.
Do you see the retrograde burn in progress? Yes, we do. The station is to the right. We have filter message on. Accelerometer just turned off, right? Can we...
Again, you're looking at downlink television from a black and white camera on the Soyuz, looking at the International Space Station as it aligns itself to a point directly behind the Pirs docking compartment. Everything going very smoothly, no issues associated with this approach, as new residents are soon to arrive at the complex for 6 months of maintenance and scientific research activities.
We see the station. We're in fly around. We have a failure on plus X. Let's switch to manual. Yes, please switch to manual. Retrograde. Switching to manual. Okay, turning on RVK. Yes, RVK and retrograde burn. Okay, starting retrograde burn. Everything looks good. Everything's great.
Okay, it's nominal right now. Copy. Do you see the digital? Yeah, I see. Do you see the angle number? Yes, I do. Watch the range, okay? There is a tiny, very tiny approach, almost at station keeping. Now switch to bed 2. Copy.
Fly around of the space station almost completed now by Solyzhan Sharipov as we're about to enter into that station keeping period. The Soyuz about 110 meters away from the Pirs docking compartment.
And DPO bay.
And the range now is stable.
Off.
All systems on the Soyuz continue to function normally as we have begun our period of station keeping, where basically the brakes have been put on and the Soyuz is holding steady, waiting for a final systems check. And for the Russian flight controllers, led by lead flight director Vladimir Solovyev, to assess the data.
Watch your leg.
The pre-programmed commanding should reinitiate the final approach of the Soyuz for its docking in about 6 minutes or so.
Off. ROVK. Off. Okay, copy. Aerovica is off. Now move forward. Copy. Okay. Okay, off, and then turn it on. Power cycle. DPO, turn it on. DPO, B2. Okay, DPO B2 is on. 5-7. A9, the first A9. Did you say A9? Yes. Tenshan is Aerovica off? Yes, it's off. Well, power cycle it. Turn it off and then on. Okay, it's off. Copy. It's off. We did turn it off. Now we're power cycle it. Now we're turn it on. No, don't turn it on yet. Okay, don't turn it on. Okay, let's turn it off again. Okay, Aerovica is off. Station is moving to the right. Now switch into a manual mode. Okay, Aerovica is on.
Yes,
See the thrusters. Watch the thrusters. Which thrusters did you turn off? Which one did you select? Backup B2. Okay, move on. Move on. Don't lose the station. Keep it in your sight. Okay, now move on in manual mode. Copy. Okay, you're too fast.
Держи вот эту ручку, Юра. Мешает мне вот это. Салижан, через 3 минуты выход из тени.
Okay, Salajan, in 3 minutes you will be in the daylight. Okay. Now, what are the angles?
This is Mission Control Koryov, about 137 meters separating the Soyuz Tma 5 vehicle and the Pirs docking compartment of the International Space Station. There was a momentary loss of capability of the core's automated docking system on board the Soyuz, and flight controllers here at the Russian Mission Control Center directed Soyuz Commander Salizhan Sharipov to take over manual control of the flying of the Soyuz for its docking to the Pirs docking compartment, something he has trained extensively for. And now with just 89 meters separating the two craft, the Soyuz is closing at about 1/10 of a meter per second. Everything in good shape, but Sharipov now in control of the stick of the Soyuz vehicle, approaching the International Space Station for what we believe will be a manual docking.
Okay, do you see the range? Yes. Okay, the angle is 2.5. See with the contingency. Yes. Yes, is it lowering? Yes, it is. Now I will be doing the fly around. Okay, he's moving steady. Steady as soon as we get into daylight.
We're about 2 minutes away from orbital sunrise. Salizhan Sharipov, the Soyuz commander of Expedition 10, on board the TMA-5 craft, about 117 meters or so away from the docking port of the Piers docking compartment, after having taken over manual control of the Soyuz due to an unexpected loss of capability of the Corps' automated rendezvous system on the Soyuz. Again, Sharipov has trained extensively for a manual approach. Normally, the Corps system will automatically guide the Soyuz in for its docking. Sharipov now in manual control as he works his way towards the docking port at the Piers docking compartment. You can see in very plain view the International Space Station just about 100 meters or so away between the Soyuz and the International Complex as Gennady Padalka and Mike Fink await the arrival of the new residents on board the station. This manual approach has been trained for quite a bit in pre-flight training by Sharipov and the prime flight engineer Leroy Chow, who's the overall increment commander for Expedition 10. Now we're coming into an orbital sunrise as the Soyuz and the International Space Station fly over Russian ground stations in Western Europe, and those ground stations will stretch all the way through Europe and Eastern Asia for about a 24-minute period in which we will get continuing telemetry through the Russian ground sites as the Soyuz approaches the station. You can see in this view from cameras on board the International Space Station, the Soyuz Tma-5 craft. You will see periodically thruster firings that Sharipov will be executing to fine-tune his alignment of the forward docking mechanism on the Soyuz with the Piers docking compartment. He again is continuing to manually fly the Soyuz for its docking to the Piers docking compartment of the station.
Well, we have about 10 more minutes to do the fly around, and then we will do the station keeping. Okay, copy. Salizhan, everything is nominal. And just move in manual mode. Okay, I'm close to the docking compartment, and I'm ready for the docking. Now retract antenna. Okay, copy.
This view from one of the cameras on the Canadarm 2 robotic arm showing the final approach of the Soyuz Tma-5 vehicle being flown manually by Salizhan Sharipov. You just heard a moment ago the Chief Flight Director, Vladimir Soloviev, here in the Mission Control Center in Korolyov, telling Salizhan that everything appears normal. A good, methodical approach for the link-up, which should occur just a few minutes from now. The two craft flying at an altitude of 225 statute miles. The Soyuz system's in good shape after Sharipov took over manual control of the flying of the Soyuz due to an unspecified problem with the Corps' automated rendezvous system on the Tma-5 vehicle.
Everything's normal. Everything's nominal. And from format arithmetic. Okay. Okay, Salizhan, you're moving steady. Everything's nominal.
Good alignment reported between the forward docking probe of the Soyuz vehicle and the Piers docking compartment. Again, you're watching downlink television from the Canadarm 2 robotic arm as the Soyuz craft, about 49 hours after its launch from the Baikonur Cosmodrome in Kazakhstan, closes the final few meters for its link up to the complex. This is
An outstanding view of the Soyuz vehicle as it makes its way in. Salizhan Sharipov has perfectly aligned the Soyuz forward docking mechanism with the Pirs docking compartment, just a few meters separating the two craft. Less than 10 meters between the Soyuz and the Pirs docking compartment. This view is from the tip elbow camera on the Canadarm2 robotic arm on the International Space Station.
Okay. You can turn on the light. 20 meters range. Copy. How's the speed? Nominal.
Sharipov reporting that everything is in good shape on board the Soyuz. That's been confirmed by Russian flight controllers here. Closing at 0.2 of a meter per second. Flight controllers here at the Russian Mission Control Center now standing by for contact and capture of the International Space Station.
Range 15 meters. Watch the velocity. Copy. The velocity is nominal. Everything's fine. I said it's nominal. Range 3 meters. Crosshairs.
You see a good view on the right of the Soyuz Tma 4 craft. That will be the ride home for Gennady Padalka, Mike Fink, and Yuri Shargin on October 24th. And the new vehicle, the Soyuz Tma 5, now just within a few meters of the Pirs docking compartment that you see on the lower left-hand portion of your screen.
Velocity.
The two craft flying 225 meters above Central Asia as we stand by for contact and capture.
1 meter range. Excellent. Contact.
Docking confirmed. At 8:16 a.m. Moscow time, 11:16 p.m. Houston time, new residents have arrived at the International Space Station. A manual docking by Salizhan Sharipov, right on the money. After a perfect approach following a problem with the Corps' automated rendezvous system that caused Sharipov to take over manual control of the flying of the Soyuz Tma craft. Docking confirmed.
Okay, off. Okay, watch the press car. Go.
Two Soyuz vehicles sit side by side at the International Space Station. 5 crew members now at the space station. Once the relative motion between the Soyuz and its docking interface at the Pirs docking compartment settles down, the hooks and latches will begin their period of engagement to form a hard mate between the two crafts.
Yes, page 83. Everything is completed. And then 80. Yes, 83.
Так. Так. Чел.
Now, docking and leak check of the Soyuz. That's on that page. Contact now. Looking for that procedure. 69.
Я слышу о тебе, экипаж, я слышу. Повтори, пожалуйста.
Once again, a smooth docking for Soyuz Sharipov, the docking occurring just about 5 minutes ago at 11:16 p.m. Central Time, 8:16 a.m. here at the Russian Mission Control Center outside of Moscow. A manual approach smoothly conducted by Sharipov to guide the Soyuz vehicle in for its link up to the Pirs docking compartment as we await the mating of the hooks and latches between the two docking systems to form a hard mate between the two vehicles. That will be followed by the start of about 3 hours of leak checks between the two spacecraft and the 5 crew members on either side of the docking interface to ensure that there is a tight seal before the hatches are open at about 2:25 a.m. Central Time, 11:25 a.m. Moscow time, I should say, about 3 hours from now.
Okay. Station is moving to the right. Now switching to a manual mode.
Sharipov now in manual control as he works his way towards the docking port at the Pirs docking compartment.
Soyuz, everything is nominal. And just move in manual mode. Okay, I'm close to the docking compartment and I'm ready for the docking.
This is an outstanding view of the Soyuz vehicle as it makes its way in. Soyuz Sharipov has perfectly aligned the Soyuz forward docking mechanism with the Pirs docking compartment, just a few meters separating the two craft.
How's the speed? Nominal?
Sharipov reporting that everything is in good shape on board the Soyuz. That's been confirmed by Russian flight controllers here. Closing at 0.2 of a meter per second.
Contact.
Docking confirmed. At 8:16 a.m. Moscow time, 11:16 p.m. Houston time, new residents have arrived at the International Space Station. And the Expedition 9 commander, Gennady Padalka, now opening the hatch. Soyuz Sharipov first in as he is greeted. Leroy Chow. Chow now greeting his American colleague Mike Fink. Yuri Shardin now floating in. All 5 crew members now on board the International Space Station.